Hey everyone, and welcome to a brand new episode of Academy Anonymous. Happy New Year. Great to have you with us here again. A lot of things going on. First month of the new year, and we're trekking towards what eventually will be Oscar nominations coming up soon. A lot of televised programming, a final say on a bunch of screenings, final predictions for a bunch of ceremonies. Got a lot to cover today. Let's jump right in. As always, I'm Joseph, and I'm here with
Jules. And as always, remember to check out our socials, especially our Twitter at Academy Anon. It's on the cover art for the podcast. And also check out our website, framesandflicker.com. We've also updated the prediction charts with all the precursors coming out. And then this January is packed with precursors from the industry, which is arguably much more important than what the critics' precursors entail. So be sure to check that out. You'll see a lot of, wins, noms, special mentions, runner-ups, all on our prediction charts. It's really cool. And yeah.
Well, I think it's time for us to talk about MARTY SUPREME. It opened up over Christmas, which was last weekend. This is its second weekend. And so far, it seems like there's a lot to celebrate for A24. Of course, critics have really loved the film since it premiered at the New York Film Festival as a secret screening. But I think some of the more headline-grabbing news pertaining to that film recently has just been the tremendous success it has found at the box office. So in limited release over a few days before Christmas, it was massive over just a few theaters in New York. Then it finally came out on Christmas. It over Christmas weekend, it was number 3, and it scored 28 million. Right now, it just finished its second weekend, and to date, it has around 56 million in the domestic on the U.S. side. I think that was good for a number 4 finish. And so it has officially, I think, become the highest grossing A24 film that was released in 2025. Some people are already predicting that it's going to surpass 100 million, which is a big, big get. The second closest film from A24 in last year, 2025, was Materialist, which was a huge hit over the summer, a huge sleeper hit, and that only scored 32 million. The closest number to what MARTY has right now, 56 million, what it has over its second weekend, is probably Civil War, which was a big summer hit for A24 last year when it scored 68 million in the U.S. Their best picture player last year was Brutalist, and that scored 16 million in the U.S. And so MARTY certainly has a lot more to sort of angle as a huge box office success. I think in further context, Uncut Gems was the other big Safdie movie, this movie directed by Josh, but Uncut Gems was the big Safdie movie from 2019. A24 tried to push that. Obviously, we all know how that ended, but it did score 50 million over its run. So MARTY has officially surpassed what Uncut Gems accumulated in 2019.
Right. And, there's been publications already kind of crowning Timothée Chalamet as, king of the box office, especially for these award season December releases off the heels of A Complete Unknown, which did really well over Christmas last year. It was around number 6, but it made 23 million by that time. And overall, it ended up making 75 million on the U.S., which is a pretty good number, and 64 million internationally. And we also saw success with that movie that got 8 Academy Award nominations. I wonder if this film, Uncut Gems, MARTY SUPREME, will be able to meet those standards. That's a curious question that I have. And on that note, we also got a chance to screen the film along with all of you over the Christmas break. For those of us who weren't fortunate enough to see it beforehand, had to see it with crowds. It's very much, some people were commenting on how this film reflects the sort of Safdie energy more than the Smashing Machine does. And I would agree with that. There's a propulsive energy to this, sort of a chaos, a familiar chaos that we have grown to be familiar with, with the Safdies au revoir. That's definitely here, in terms of editing and sound work. Certainly the music, the musical score, which I believe are the same composers who did Good Time and Uncut Gems, I believe, has a very, a cast that is very strange. When you can see Abel Ferrara in one scene, and then you can see Gwyneth Paltrow in another scene, and Odessa Zion. It's very eclectic. Mr. Wonderful, whatever his name is. It's very eclectic, and that was also very, I think that added an energy to the piece, a spontaneous, chaotic energy to the piece that I thought was fitting. I think it's a film that really puts the titular character, Marty Mauser, who is loosely based on the
Marty Reisman.
Marty Reisman, right? The American table tennis player. I think it's very loosely based. I don't know.
Yeah, I'm sure it's very loosely based.
It's certainly a film. I think that in the middle stretch of the film, he sort of put through a lot of trials and tribulations and obstacles that to me felt a little bit like trying to put him through obstacles.
Yeah.
Trying to amass as much chaos as possible for what I think is a really simple and, invigorating story, about, chasing greatness and the sacrifice that comes with trying to find and attain and acquire that greatness, which I think are elements that are present in other aspects of the Safdie's films, the Safdies together. And so that's certainly present here, but I did feel like that middle stretch was really trying to elongate and, protract, that sort of journey in a way that I didn't feel was as organic personally, at least on first watch. This is just my first impression. And I also found that I have, I think, a bit some qualms with the ending of the film that I'm still lingering. I'm still weighing upon, I'm still weighing them rather. In a way, I think there's something about the ending, and I won't spoil anything for people who haven't seen it yet, but there's something about the ending that I think undercuts a little bit of what came before it in a way that I don't know if it was intentional or just, what is the experience of watching the film. But I certainly, I'm thinking about that ending. If it's a compelling ending in terms of how well it's performed by Timothée Chalamet, but I do think that in a way it kind of undercuts what we were seeing before, or rather that it's in a way it's the one moment in the film that I think, departs from, as Timothée Chalamet would say, the spirit of Marty.
Right.
It departs. I mean, it's a departure that happens in that last few moments that I'm still weighing if it was, what I would have done personally.
Right.
Well, those are just some initial thoughts. What did you think?
Well, I mean, I think we have very similar impressions. We were lucky enough to watch it together. My first reaction is that it's very much the Safdie formula. As you've said, a lot of their trademark filmmaking is here. I don't think that there's a lot of division between Uncut Gems and Marty Supreme. I feel like they're certainly cut from the same cloth, which is interesting because to a certain degree we can have the conversation of did any individual Safdie brother demonstrate, a large amount of growth in either project? My quick answer would probably not. It's a little bit more of the same. And if you enjoy that, then it's certainly worth celebrating and buying a ticket to and reflecting on. And I think it's a very enjoyable film, like Smashing Machine and certainly like Uncut Gems. And this one, I think I understand why there are more Safdie fans flocking to this one. There's a certain quietness to the Smashing Machine, which is actually a little bit stranger to see coming from a Safdie than Marty Supreme. You have here Marty Supreme a little bit more of the anxiety-inducing energy, which in my opinion was best done probably in If I Had Legs I'd Kick You. I think that's the best Safdie film of the year that's not directed by a Safdie. Mary Bronstein directed that. I think it's the better of the three. That being said, there's no real transcendence here. There's no real departure. And so the issue is, how are voters going to react? And what there is a real life figure, Marty Reisman, at the center of it. Again, extremely loosely based. And it's also a period piece. And he has probably more notable collaborators this year, this time around, including, for example, Jack Fisk, who does a brilliant job in the production design.
Yes.
So I think you run into, because it is a Safdie formula, you're going to run into certain issues. And unlike Uncut Gems, Adam Sandler is not starring in this movie. If Adam Sandler were starring in this movie, I think we could have a really interesting conversation as to how far does it get or not. But it is Timothée Chalamet, who's very celebrated, and he has a lot to chew on here, and he does an excellent job. But it is still a very unlikable character. It's a character that's difficult to root for. It's a character that's difficult to sympathize with, and that's going to be a turnoff, I think, to a lot of voters. This cast, you don't have the wonderful Julia Fox in it in Uncut Gems, right? But again, no voter's going to take that seriously. You have Gwyneth Paltrow and Odessa, and they both do a wonderful job, but they don't have a lot of material either. You have Kevin O'Leary in it, you have Tyler Creator in it, and they also each do a really good job. They still don't have a lot of material in it, in my opinion, because that's just not the nature of how a Safdie film is constructed, so to speak. It's a little bit more, as we've said, focused on that central character, which would be Marty Mauser and Timothée Chalamet.
He's the anchor, the way that the protagonists, or rather the anti-heroes of the Safdie films are. He's the anchor, he's the twister, everything else is just revolving around him. So even if, you enjoy seeing, Gwyneth Paltrow on screen again, or, I actually thought that Mr. Wonderful did a very good job. I found him very believable as that character. Maybe there wasn't much of a departure, who knows? And so, even though it's a colorful cast, none of them have the substance that Timothée Chalamet's character carries.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we think about supporting players, I don't really see that happening here. I think it's very much the Timothée Chalamet show, and that will be reflected in the nominations for the acting nominations as well. And I think we'll see that in SAG coming up, that it will do, in a way, it's not that different. Well, the energy is different, but it's not that different from The Brutalist, in a way that at the SAGs, I expect people were surprised that it was just Adrian Brody who showed up, but I kind of expect something similar to happen here, where it's just Timothée Chalamet that shows up and maybe doesn't even get nominated for ensemble, because there is something about the casting in this film that can, I guess, read to some people as a little bit ostentatious. These strange casting choices, which again I think work for the film, but I think might not work for every viewer. But I think you bring up a really good point about, if Timothée Chalamet wasn't starring in this movie and it were a different actor of a different caliber, of a different status, would it be the same? Would it be looked at in the same way? And I'm not 100% sure about that as well.
That's what I was kind of insinuating with this idea of, like, what they took here was the Uncut Gems sort of formula, and they adjusted it just enough to give it a little bit more of an awards angle. So what if I told you, take away the Uncut Gems, it's the Uncut Gems outline, right? But someone comes in the room and says, but instead of it being about seedy, sort of jewelry pawn shops, it's going to be about ping pong and table tennis, right? And quote unquote, the start of a sport in America. And we also said, and it's not going to be a contemporary piece anymore that has Furbies, but it's instead going to be a period piece, right? And post-war, right? And what if I also said that it's not going to be Adam Sandler, but it's going to be Christian Bale? That movie already will probably have a much easier time figuring into the Oscars than Uncut Gems. And so they've sort of adjusted that formula now and they've included Timothée Chalamet in it. And I think that is what's working for them. I think a big test is we're going to see how the Guild Awards react. I think you had pointed out, right, that the Safdies have always appealed to international voters. Yes. They've like gone to Cannes and
right. I think they do appeal to international voters, and I think their stature in the film community has only increased through the years, especially after films like Uncut Gems and Good Time. And so I certainly think there's an aspect to that I think is going for them in terms of this awards run for Marty Supreme and for Josh Safdie. I do think they have international fans, and I think that's no small thing in today's Academy. But I think it's still a question mark how big of fans is the American component of the AMPAS membership.
Exactly, and I think the Guild Awards, things like BAFTA long list, those are going to go a long way into showing how receptive they are. I mean, we already have 3 Golden Globe nominations for Marty to Uncut Gems is 0. At the same time, I'm not going to say that this should play out like a traditional sports movie. There's very little sports movie in this, right? And it's not going to play out as a traditional rags to riches story, because it's sort of, the movie really subverts that too, right? And so there's still, again, because it is a Safdie film, there are plenty of alienating things about it.
Right. I'll just say as a final note, I think the film is at its best when it's getting to the bone or to the nitty gritty of, like I said, those the things that you sacrifice in your pursuit of greatness. Among them, your person, dignity, your actual dreams in and of themselves, your worldview, everything. And so I thought that was still palpable in the film, aided a lot by a lot of the performances and, some of the technical aspects of the film. It's still an immersive film. I just wish that some of the chaos, or most of the chaos, because the film is almost pure chaos in a way, the way that is very familiar with us if you've seen Safdie films. I just wish that some of the chaos didn't feel like trying to drum up chaos to tell you the story.
Right.
But it's still, it's hard to not feel immersed in their storytelling, with their camera choices and the energy that they're able to conjure up, which is no small thing. So that's certainly still present here. And I do think, as we've been saying, there is a fan base for that.
Oh, yeah.
And that fan base has grown.
Right.
So...
And I do think that voters are going to be able to sort of distill this and say, first of all, I had a good time. I enjoyed it. I'm really impressed by the technical skill. And at the end of the day, it's a story that's, sort of critiquing the male ego, right? And they're going to be drawn to that. But I also think you had a great comparison because that has its limitations. I think one of the films that you had mentioned that I thought was like, you know what? I see a lot of DNA there. You mentioned The Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
Right. And so what was your sort of connection there between those two movies and kind of like what their fate may be at the Academy?
Well, I just, you have an anti-hero in both of them. You have an anti-hero in Timothée Chalamet's character and Leo DiCaprio's character. But I also think, The Wolf of Wall Street has, this debauchery, underpinning the entire film that I think audiences were not as receptive to. I remember the cinema score after The Wolf of Wall Street was pretty low. I think it was like a C or C minus, and people felt by and large that, and I think it also came out around this time, Christmas, weird choice for that movie. And so I think people had a problem with, I think, interpreting that the film was celebrating this sort of behavior and debauchery, but really, if you were really paying attention to that movie, it was Martin Scorsese and his filmmaking collaborators were really, criticizing that world and that behavior in a way that felt incredibly haunting and compelling and palpable. So I disagreed with that criticism, from the get-go. But I think this film is having a different reception because even though I wouldn't label debauchery, I wouldn't use that term. I like the term chaos, and even though he is a very unlikable character, in several moments, several instances, I still feel like people are responding to the film in a way that is different from The Wolf of Wall Street. I mean, we saw the cinema score was pretty good from regular moviegoers. And so I think in a way, this is maybe a more tame / more accessible version of that kind of filmmaking, worldview.
Right. I think all that is accurate, and I agree with a lot of that. I think certainly the cinema score is higher, which bodes better for this movie. The money is really good, right? As you just pointed out, like it's on track to surpass A Complete Unknown and surpass Uncut Gems and be, A24's flagship victory of the year. Timothée Chalamet, for all the antics that he did and promoted, it seems like it paid off. And so people are not going to be, that helps, right? Because people aren't going to be critical about the performance to promote the film. Right? Had the film flopped, if the film had flopped, everyone's going to hyper focus on, some of the marketing decisions. So I think that helps a lot. I kind of, if we can focus in on the awards prospects, my immediate reaction walking out of the film in terms of, that context is what a mistake the timing was, because I understand that he's the favorite to win Best Actor. And a lot of things have to happen for that to go wrong. But the nature of the character is already an inherent complication in that. Whereas, had Marty Supreme come out last Christmas and A Complete Unknown come out this Christmas, I would guarantee you that he would be an Oscar winner. Because it is much easier to hand him the Oscar for playing Bob Dylan in the film that A Complete Unknown is, the way that he chose to play him, than it is to hand him the award for playing Marty Mauser and Marty Supreme. It's almost like, he has this whole idea of he can't lose this year because he's coming off that nomination and off a should have won for a complete unknown. But between the two, one of them is like tailor-made to get an Oscar, and the other one is usually tailor-made to be nominated for an Oscar, but not to win. So my immediate reaction was there was a mistake here, and Marty Supreme should have come out first and then a complete unknown, and that would have guaranteed a win.
I think that's a really good point, and I think we'll be talking about that as the weeks progress leading up to the Oscars. Obviously, I don't think there's a danger in Timothée Chalamet missing a nomination here. I think his peers will be impressed by his range, and I certainly think it's the darkest role he's done, and he pulls it off really well, actually. I think that I was really able to buy the character that he was selling. I really bought it. And in particular, those final moments he has, I think, are among, the strongest work he's done. But I do wonder, after seeing the film, the unlikability of the character and the kind of film he's in, if that's something that's going to seriously affect his chances at winning. And I don't think that his performance, antics, selling, promoting the film, marketing the film are lost on the Academy. I think that's something that the Academy is aware of. I don't think it's pulled very high, so to speak, this sort of cocky confidence, and, sort of bravura, that kind of thing that he's doing. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that it's come across as, to some voters as best actor material. Mm-hmm. I think what he has to contrast that is, again, actions speak louder than words. 3 nominations before the age of 30. That's already a lot, all in the lead category. Mm-hmm. But I do think that his character presents the possibility that someone else could swoop in and take the lead over him. And so I would caution anyone who's listening to not consider the Timothée Chalamet Oscar win set in stone. This could easily be a moment for someone like Ethan Hawke, who has been here several times, already has 4 Oscar nominations, 2 for writing. This would be his 5th as an actor. Blue Moon has done better than most people were expecting for a movie that premiered in Berlin in February of last year. And he's playing a real life figure, and it's certainly something that, Academy voters, a certain faction of the Academy voters are more comfortable with. And some people might say that, it's not necessarily fair for Timothée Chalamet to get an Oscar before Ethan Hawke does, and maybe that argument could be undone if it's the kind of movie / performance that you just can't help but want to embrace. Certainly that can happen, but I'm not sure that Marty Mauser and Marty Supreme is that yet.
Yeah.
So, I think the nomination is absolutely safe. Is the win safe? That's a question mark.
I think after screening it makes me feel like it's very much going to be a dogfight that, Wagner Moura, Ethan Hawke, Leo DiCaprio, all of them will be formidable challengers for Timothée Chalamet, and that my gut says that the character of Marty Mauser does not win an Oscar. That he'll get, things that he missed last year. I don't think he'll repeat the SAG, but maybe he'll get a Globe or a Critics' Choice or something like that. But I am tempted to say that he will fall short of the Oscar win because it's just simply not what they give an Oscar to.
That's true, but I will say that, we looked in the past history a couple of years ago that, people who've gotten back-to-back nominations in the lead category, they tend to, when you get 3 nominations in that lead category, one of those tend to be a win. Mm-hmm. Someone like Carey Mulligan did it recently and didn't win for when she got her 3rd nomination in the lead category for Maestro. But it tends to be something that does happen. Right. So it would make sense for him to be on his way to a win. And like I said, he might be very liked in the industry, and that might be enough. People will appreciate the stretch, and that might be enough. So yeah, but I agree with you. It's a fight. It's not a set in stone.
So where else do you think the film could pop up?
Well, besides Best Picture and Best Actor, I don't see a supporting nomination here. Despite quite liking Odessa Ozyan in it, and Mr. Wonderful, I don't see a supporting nomination here. A screenplay nom, I think writers will be eager to welcome the Safdies into that status of a nominated writer.
A24 does well there.
Yes.
Also, and the competition is not very high.
And then I think that there's a few more question marks in terms of below the line that I wonder how far it's going to go. I think the biggest ones in question are editing, and original score and production design.
Right.
I think the production design is really impressive, but I think that the way that the film is filmed, with, a lot of close-ups, a lot of heavy close-ups, they don't necessarily give you the opportunity to sort of immerse yourself into the world, but the world looks beautiful. And again, the same thing for the costume design. The costume design is very, very well done, but the filmic choices don't lend itself to, the external. They very much prioritize the internal, the psychological state,
right?
Which I think could have an effect on some of the production possibilities for nominations. But I do think that Jack Fisk is a legend, and one of our greats, and I think that might be enough to land a production design nomination, especially with the field that we're looking at, with some contenders being repeats for franchises, etc. I don't see a costume design nomination here. And I wonder if in original score, this film can get in alongside another film like SIRÄT, which we'll be talking about soon. I don't see them both getting in.
Right. It also got shortlisted for cinematography, but Darius Kanji was nominated for Bardo recently, so I don't know if he can score a nomination here for that. Even though the camera work, obviously is very singular here, and it's part of the reason that sort of may blur the ability for a voter to want to spotlight the production design work from Jack Fisk or the costume design work. And it also got shortlisted for casting. I don't know how you feel about that.
Like I said, I mentioned it earlier. I think that it's very, unorthodox casting, which is an asset. But I think for some voters, I think it might be a little too ostentatious.
Right.
You mentioned something really, really, really interesting when you said, how much our casting director is going to be wondering, how much did you search high and low to find, Tyler the Creator for that part, or Mr. Wonderful for that part. So in a way it's sort of ingenious casting, but you wonder, what you were saying.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to find out how the whole casting branch is going to react this year. But there's certainly an element here where, the film is well cast. All the actors do a good job. A lot of the actors, getting a chance to shine that don't ordinarily get that. Odessa, Tyler, the Creator. And there's enough sort of genius maneuver from the director to sort of include these people in prominent roles. And that helps market the film, whether it's Tyler or Mr. Wonderful, Abel Ferreira, that's pretty singular to their types of films. There's also all these sort of street casting that they do in really standout parts all over the film. I mean, Fran Drescher's in this movie. You have the actor who played Marty's friend. I think Dion is his name. And just have great street casting. Is actually a wonderful actor from Funny Pages that shows up here with Abel Ferreira. But the question is, it's still an unknown as to whether casting directors are going to want to spotlight that or are going to want to stay away from it, because they're going to want to instead focus on films where the casting director brought in an actor to play Abel Ferreira's part, and an actor to play Tyler's part, and an actor to play Kevin O'Leary's part. Or whether a casting director is going to say, that's genius. The job of a casting director is not to find the best actor, but rather the best living person to fill that role. You know what I mean? So I do think it's dicey at this point, whether we'll see it or not. I mean, the score has had some blowback already, as you said. It got snubbed from the Golden Globe. I think you mentioned it got snubbed also from another important precursor.
Yeah, this name is escaping me right now, but it's a precursor that I
Society
believe.
of, I think, musicians and lyricists.
Yeah, something like that. And I think that last year they had all 5 original score nominees, and that it missed there.
And the anachronism of the entire score.
That it kind of has this 80s feel.
Yes.
Even though it's taking place in the 50s.
Yeah. And so that, I think, could end up hurting it. So I think that my impression is that this will not be a double-digit movie. That this will go single digits.
Me too.
and that it'll be somewhere closer to, Moonlight's Hall, which I think, what was Moonlight's Hall?
That's 8.
That's 8. I think it may be somewhere along the 6 to 8 range. I'm seeing 8 as the high.
I see 6.
6, and I think that's kind of low.
Yeah, I think I see 6. My biggest question mark is, along with the technical categories, what about directing?
Mm-hmm.
Will they want to welcome Josh Safdie finally into directing? I think a few things are going for him. I think that his biggest competition is someone like Chloe Zhao, who was there already recently for Nomadland. I don't think that some directors are going to think that she's done enough to get a second nomination. I think it will be a shock to some people, but I totally expect for her to miss the best director, and possibly have some, blowback, because of that. Or would they prefer, the familiarity and the respect of someone like Guillermo del Toro, and to nab that final spot for best director? Or possibly someone completely, out of the box like Oliver Lax for SIRÄT.
Mm-hmm.
I question how locked best director is as a nomination.
I think the Guild Awards next week are going to start painting a clearer picture of what the fate is for Marty.
Right. But right now, what categories do you feel confident in?
Right now, I'd probably say picture, actor, screenplay. I think I'm going to put film editing because I'm not sure I have enough movies that really stand out there. But again, the film editing is not traditionally what the branch would go for. Mm-hmm. It's very much, edited in the style of a Safdie film.
Right.
And then I think because it's an unknown sort of quantity right now, I think casting is still a good bet. So I think that's 5.
I feel like production design will prevail.
I think it's going to be tough because I'm not sure I can see this muscling out Avatar or Wicked, regardless of their reception overall at the Oscars. And I think this will be tight to try to get that spot over Hamnet. And so I'm not sure there's enough room for it.
Interesting.
And I'm not sure I can see it for cinematography either.
No, I don't see it for cinematography.
And so, yeah, I think maybe the 5 to 6 range we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, now we'll go to another film that we were able to screen. We were fortunate enough to screen this week, which was Oliver Lax's SIRÄT. As some of our listeners know, we've had a very turbulent experience with that film, from wanting to see it at Cannes to not being able to have to wait all these months to finally be able to watch it. We finally saw it. I think it's a visionary piece. I think it's very singular, a singular experience, a sensory experience to the max. My one regret is possibly not seeing the film in a theater, because I think it's the kind of film that demands a theatrical experience.
Well, Neon didn't really put it out in a theater either.
Not yet, at least.
Yeah, they're probably waiting until it gets nominated or gets snubbed, one of those two.
Right. It's an immersive film that it really sways you into these different moods and emotional places, psychological places that I found really fascinating. And I think it's a hard film to describe in the best sense.
Yes.
I was quite fond of the film. I thought it was very compelling, very impactful, really strong filmmaking, visionary filmmaking.
Right.
And singular, very just completely singular, unique, I haven't experienced this before.
Right.
And I think that's an aspect that I think is speaking to a lot of voters. And that's why I think it's been doing well.
Well, I think right now the first recommendation is, if you're a listener, please watch SIRÄT in a theater, because it'll be worth it.
Absolutely.
In a big screen with great sound. And you won't forget the experience. This movie broke through in Cannes, right, where it won the jury prize for the first time that Oliver was in the main competition. But sort of the buzz has been surrounding this movie ever since the Oscar shortlists.
Right.
Do you remember what was it shortlisted for?
Well, it was shortlisted for international film, for best casting, for cinematography, for sound design, and for original score. It had a terrific showing.
And so it's representing Spain, and sort of everyone pegged it for international film and maybe sound or score, but the other two are really eye-opening: cinematography and casting. Yeah. And so that has sort of built this storyline as to, are we under-predicting SIRÄT, and is SIRÄT sort of quietly getting a very passionate contingent to support it? I think you had pointed out that it shouldn't be shocking, because SIRÄT did great at the European Film Awards. Right.
And at the European Film Awards, it was nominated for Best Film, Director, Screenwriter, for Best Actor, for Casting Director, for Cinematography, for Editor, for Production Design, and for Sound Design. It was snubbed, interestingly enough, from Best Score.
Well, that's interesting.
And I believe it was the most nominated film with 9 nominations.
That's right, yeah.
Tied for second was Sentimental Value and Sound of Falling, Sound of Falling is another incredible film.
So, yeah, it was able to be the most nominated film at the European Film Awards, and it was even able to beat Sentimental Value. Now, like, here's the caveat is that, like, this year, I think there were more nominations than ever at the European Film Awards because it used to be that they would just hand out a prize for Best Cinematography. And this year, they shortlisted three movies, including SIRÄT, including Sound of Falling, and I think Franz is the third nominee there. But so that has sort of, inflated the haul a little bit of SIRÄT. Had there only been a winner, maybe cinematography would have just been Sound of Falling. But regardless, it did show up in picture, director, the acting categories, the writing category. So it's a really well-liked film.
Right.
I think the other thing to sort of be cognizant of is that not only did it like perform really well with all these nominations, even if it's inflated, it has sort of matched without those technical nominations, the reception to films like Anatomy of a Fall, Zone of Interest, Emilia Perez.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure if either you or I are pegging this movie to win the European Film Award for Best Film.
I'm not sure that I'm there just yet, but I will say that something we've been noticing is along the lines we've been saying it all year, the foreign contingent of the Academy, I think, is stronger than ever. And I think that we've been seeing a lot of overlap between prestigious award platforms like the European Film Awards and the Oscar Awards having, a shared DNA.
An overlap.
So I think a film that does well at the European Film Awards, more often than not, as of now, in modern day, Oscar landscape, are having success at the Oscars. And so it's interesting to see that a film like SIRÄT made the shortlist for casting, for cinematography, for sound, and it was nominated in those places at the European Film Awards.
Right.
And if you go a little bit further, if you dig a little further, you see a film like Sound of Falling, which I believe made it into the cinematography shortlist for the Oscars. That was also nominated for Best Cinematography at the European Film Awards.
Yeah.
So there's an interesting overlap that's happening here between those two awards bodies that I wouldn't overlook.
I mean, I think it's sort of interesting too because you just said Sound of Falling overlapped at the cinematographers shortlist at the Oscars, but it didn't really show up anywhere else. And it got 8 nominations at the European Film Awards. SIRÄT from Spain showed up in a lot of places, right? And Sentimental Value showed up in some surprising places, like I think cinematography as well at the Oscar shortlist, and everyone's sort of pegging that as a top 5 Best Picture movie. What's kind of interesting to think about is if that foreign contingent is as strong as you're suggesting, and I believe that it is, we know that that's what's going to make Sentimental Value a top 5 movie.
Right.
We have empty spots at the bottom of Best Picture that are vacant right now. And SIRÄT may have enough of a passionate support to get in there. But when it comes to below the line, Sentimental Value should not do as well, right? And I don't think that those voters are going to say, oh, well, I'm a European sound designer, I'm a European guild member, or I work in the European industry and I get a vote for cinematography. And, Sentimental Value isn't the most, isn't my favorite cinematography job of the year. So I'm just going to go ahead and nominate all American films this year. No, they're going to say, well, which film from the European side that I love? Oh, I loved SIRÄT.
Right.
So I kind of wonder if they can sort of complement each other in the sense that Sentimental Value can dominate above the line and get a Best Picture nomination, and then SIRÄT can surprise below the line and maybe get a Best Picture nomination.
Yeah, I think that's very valid, but I'll also say that a film like SIRÄT is so dangerous because when we're contemplating a Best Picture 10 and we're thinking about those last 2 spots, because I do think that there are 8 films that seem pretty good for those, those top 8. A film that has a passion vote like SIRÄT might be more appealing for a voter than I have to nominate a franchise film, so I'm going to put Avatar, even though I think it's the lesser of the other 2 or the lesser of the 3. Same thing with Wicked. I'm going to put Wicked, even though I think it's certainly the lesser of the 2. A passion vote there is what's going to matter most.
Right.
And so I think we're looking at a year. I mean, nothing is set in stone just yet, but I have a feeling that those passion votes will override these, I guess I have to nominate this because this is what I'm supposed to nominate. But if I'm being 100% honest, I wasn't that crazy about it. I I had mentioned this in an earlier episode. Why not instead nominate neither of those and put something that you are passionate about?
Yeah. This is the argument for I'm Still Here, by the way.
Exactly.
That's what worked out last year.
Exactly. And, I think this is a very interesting year, in a year where Neon might be able to take all foreign spots in Best Foreign Language Film. I think it might be a breakthrough year where we see the most nominated foreign films, Best Picture. Right now, I'm feeling pretty good. I mean, everyone should be feeling good about Sentimental Valley, and it was just an accident. But The Secret Agent is right there and ripe for the taking. And I think SIRÄT, and maybe even something like No Other Choice, which did really well at the Golden Globes, are just right there to take those passion votes away from something like Wicked or Avatar or, Begonia, for a filmmaker that's already been made, some people might consider has already been, handsomely rewarded.
Yeah. And so before we saw the film, all the talk was on the sound design. And we had sort of said that sound for an international film is key to breaking into Best Picture. We've seen the film now. I think it's a great contender for sound design. And I think I would probably bet on it finishing in the top 5 there, and that bodes really well for it crashing into Best Picture. I think we both sort of see it for foreign film.
Yeah,
I
of course, foreign film, and I think I'm feeling good about original score.
Score is the tricky one because it did not get listed at the European Film Awards, which is kind of shocking, but it got the Golden Globe nomination. And usually the foreign films that get shortlisted there do end up getting a nomination.
Yeah, exactly. I will say one of the categories that I feel best about is best casting.
Right.
I think the casting is a highlight of the film. It makes absolute sense why that film would get nominated at the European Film Awards and make the shortlist for the Oscars. It absolutely deserves to be nominated for casting, and I think that it will.
Yeah, I think that, remember, I think there's a casting bake-off, but if they can present a compelling argument, it's going to be tough to not put that film for best casting, I have to say. At the same time, so sound should contend in score, even though MARTY SUPREME might be an issue there because they're not, again, the traditional films you would nominate for score. And it missed that European Film Award nomination. I worry about that. We both have it for international film. Casting, if you watch the film, and again, maybe the bake-off is what's going to bite it in the butt at the end, but the work of the casting is really, really attention-calling. But then I'll go ahead and I'll say, if the branch continues to want to include an international film in the cinematographer, in the nominations for Best Cinematography, right, which have leaned towards including a foreign film, right, a foreign film contender. You think about, for example, El Conde, which got in. Last year, Emilia Perez got in, and it was snubbed from the Guild, right? And I had sort of pitched all year that the film just is not well shot enough, and the cinematographer is just not well known enough, and sort of the concept behind the cinematography wasn't fine-tuned enough to get in. It still got in because it was a major Best Picture movie. And so do you think a shot exists where if I had to include a foreign film into Best Cinematography, is SIRÄT the option?
I think SIRÄT is the option for cinematography, even though I'm a big fan of the cinematography in The Secret Agent. I think it's gorgeous.
Sound of Falling, too.
Sound of Falling is incredible. But right now, I feel pretty comfortable with the consensus 5. I don't think that'll depart much from those 5.
It'll be short of an international title.
I think that it will, because I think the showing us of Frankenstein, which is the only one that I debate, because, he's been there, already twice for Guillermo del Toro films. Or no, just once, I believe. No, twice, correct?
Twice.
Shape of Water and Nightmare Alley. I wonder if, they might say, I want to nominate someone new, and not another collaboration between the cinematographer and Guillermo del Toro. But the showiness, I think, will prevail in the end for Frankenstein. So I think it'll be those 5.
I think that it's going to be really close. But so I think right now, we're looking at possibly, on the high end, international film, original score, sound design, casting, cinematography, and I think that leads to a Best Picture nomination.
Right.
That's 6.
Right.
It can go lower than that, right? And maybe you're right and miss a cinematography, and it can still get 5. And you can even lose score, for example, and still get 4 if it gets Best Picture.
Right.
Which would, again, what I like is that idea where Neon is going to push movies like The Secret Agent into actor, because that's their best shot.
Right.
And Jafar Panahi into
Best
original
director.
screenplay and Best Director, because that's their best shot. And sentimental value all over above the line, because it's a foreign film that really flirts with being, accessible enough to American audiences to enjoy. But then below the line, they're really going to focus on SIRÄT, which really puts it really puts No Other Choice in a tough spot.
Right.
But I do think, after having screened the film, that the threat of SIRÄT is real in a bunch of categories, and I don't see it walking away with no nominations. And my gut says it'll get more than one.
Yeah, 100%. I agree. And I think right now, maybe I just finished seeing it, but I feel pretty high on its possibilities to crash the Best Picture 10.
The other really important thing that's going to happen this week is we're going to get some really important Guild nominations revealed. And so let's start digging into that.
Okay, and now we're going to go to the ASC, the American Society of Cinematographers, and predicting who they're going to be listing as their 5 nominees this year. The nominees will be out this week.
Right. So there's certainly, I think, some movies that are favored to get in here, right? It looks like Sinners should get in here, and that would be the first nomination for Autumn to Raw Dog Arkpaw, and actually the first time that a Ryan Coogler movie makes it in. I think we both believe that Hamnet should be comfortable here, right?
Yeah.
And Lucas Zal actually, I believe, got snubbed from a nomination here for
the Zone of Interest, yeah.
The exact Zone of Interest. And he won for Cold War, so this would only be his second nomination here. But we do know that this lineup should include some previous Guild nominees and some new nominees, some first time nominees. So you have Autumn there. Lucas Zal should get in. I think we're both pretty confident about Train Dreams scoring here, partly because the DP Adolfo Veloso,
he's been on their radar.
He's been on their radar because he got that nomination.
Yeah, the Spotlight Award.
Yeah, in 2021 for Jockey, which was the previous film that he shot with Clint Bentley. So it should be the first time that he gets a nomination here. Sort of like when Lucas Zal got the Spotlight Award, I think, for Ida, before finally being nominated here for Cold War.
Cold War, yeah.
And so I think we're pretty confident about those 3. I think you and I go back and forth about Frankenstein, right? We know that Dan Lawson has been nominated here twice for
both Guillermo del Toro films.
Both Guillermo del Toro films. We know actually that Guillermo del Toro, his first breakthrough at the Oscars for cinematography was actually Pan's Labyrinth, but it did not get nominated here.
Right.
And so ever since then, he's been more on the radar of the Cinematographers Guild. And cinematographers in general, and he has his films immediately, interest some DPs to go and look at the work, and his collaboration with Dan Lawson has been very productive and beneficial. They've never won an Oscar. They've never won a Guild Award together. I think what sort of we split hairs on is, are they really going to be, do they like Dan Lawson enough to nominate him for a third time at the Guild?
And also that his previous nominations are all with also the same filmmaker.
Exactly. I don't know how many times that has happened before. I do know that 3 nominations is a little bit of a coveted thing. So someone that comes to my mind, for example, is Matthew Libatique. He's been nominated 3 times, twice with Bradley Cooper, once with Darren Aronofsky. Darius Kanji has the 3 nominations because of the Bardo mention recently.
Right.
Evita 7, again, with 3 different filmmakers. Hoyte van Hoytema has 3 nominations, right? And I think they're all with Chris, right? So I think maybe it's not a killer that Dan is still working with Guillermo del Toro potentially for this nomination. But I do wonder, do they consider Dan
at the
same level as Hoyte, who has a Guild win and has an Oscar, right? Claudio Miranda is another DP with 3, but he has an Oscar. And so some of the DPs that only have 2, for example, are Robbie Ryan, Dick Pope, Seamus McGarvey, and a lot of those guys worked with the same director, right? So Seamus McGarvey's 2 nominations come with Joe Wright,
Atonement, and Anna Karenina.
Exactly, and Robbie Ryan, of course, with all his collaborations with Yorgos. And so, do they like Dan Lawson enough to give him that 3rd nomination?
I think you bring up a very good point. And I think of the 5, this film, Frankenstein, would be the one to watch out for a possible snub. I think there's a showiness to the piece, and I think there's a scope to it. And I think that the historical the literacy importance of a Mary Shelley adaptation, might supersede what you're saying, possibly. And again, there's a really big scope to that film that might attract them. But I agree with you. I think it could get snubbed here.
The other thing that we see is usually in these guild awards, and we'll be predicting them as they go along, but usually what you'll see is it's the opportunity for these guild members to not vote just for the best work that they saw that year, but their favorite films.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Right. And so like, even if a DP's favorite work that year was Resurrection, for example, which I'm sure is beautiful, they're going to be sort of in their mind, they're going to be thinking about, well, what were my favorite films and what are my favorite films that are actually contending for Best Picture?
Right.
And so like, if you look at the consensus or what has sort of formed as the consensus 5 for Best Picture, there's an issue because what you have is sentimental value, and it was just an accident rounding out that top 5.
Right.
And we know that the DPs are going to say, okay, what else is there?
Yeah.
And so when you go down the list, the next biggest names are Train Dreams, which you and I think are very confident in, and Frankenstein.
Right.
Right. And so you have to wonder, are they even going to look that far? Or are they just going to go with consensus and say, put both of those in, even if, it means Dan and Guillermo get a 3rd nomination for a collaboration. I mean, maybe this would maybe in a weird world, this will be the 3rd collaboration and the first one they win.
Yeah.
Because they'll hold it against Autumn, the fact that it's only her first Guild nomination.
Right.
That could happen.
Right.
The 5th person that most people have, and I think you and I are in agreement, will happen.
Yeah.
But again, there's a little bit of a loophole here, is Michael Bowman for One Battle After Another. Yeah. Right.
I don't see the loophole, if you could explain, because I actually feel pretty confident in that one.
Well, I mean, obviously it's shot in VistaVision, which is going to help.
Attractive.
And it's also shot on celluloid, which is also going to help.
Right.
But the issue with Michael Bowman is that he comes up sort of working as a gaffer, and he works in so many productions, and he does a brilliant job. But so then him and Paul Thomas Anderson get in, start working together on Phantom Thread, and he eventually works his way into being the DP of Licorice Pizza and the DP of this film. This one being shot on VistaVision, but sort of he doesn't have that history of being a DP that usually comes with this Guild nomination, if that makes sort of sense.
Right.
So in a way, he's one of the most veteran people on this list, right? Because he's been working for so long as a gaffer, and at the same time, he's the one with the least amount of credits as a DP. Because that's not his strength, or that's not where he starts out, right? And so sort of in the same way where like Phantom Thread is beautifully shot, but it didn't get nominated here, right? Because of the whole, there's no DP. It was, it's a shared DP.
Yeah.
And so you have to kind of wonder, like, how do they feel about that?
Right.
I remember when Cuarón was nominated here for shooting Roma, right? And so maybe that kind of shows us, oh, well, they're going to be open to, new concept of shared DP and no DP and whatever. At the same time, in general, Cuarón's films do well here, and Paul's films have not always done well, right? I think
right. But you're right, and I think that's valid. I think that the front runner status that One Battle After Another has, I think, will help kind of propel it into a nomination here. As well as I was saying with Frankenstein, the sheer scope of that film, the amount of not just the task of VistaVision and celluloid film, but the sprawling sort of story that it has to encompass, I think is going to merit respect from his peers, which I think might also do a lot to get him into those final 5.
I mean, let's hope so. So I think we're predicting those as the 5 for the ASC, and I think we're also predicting those as the 5 for the Oscars.
Those are the 5 favorites for the Oscars. I do wonder again if there could be a surprise snub here with Frankenstein. This is a branch that is not afraid to go its own way and go against consensus.
Yeah,
I still remember 2022 when the nominees were all over the place.
Yeah.
And then eventually, Top Gun Maverick wasn't even nominated.
All Quiet Western Front, the winner of the Oscars, wasn't nominated at the Guild.
Yeah. So they're not afraid to go against the grain, which I think might be interesting to see what happens here. I know last year, there's a premonition aspect to this, because if a film does well here that you didn't expect, it could very well muster its way into the final 5. I think we saw that similarly last year with Maria, which made a surprise mention here into the top 5 and was the only nomination for that film at the Oscars. So there's very much room here for there to be a surprise. And if there is one, I think we're both in agreement that the one off the chopping block would be Frankenstein.
I think also like some movies that could pop up here. I mean, Robbie Ryan is working with Yorgos again. They've been nominated every time they've worked together, more or less. There is Kanji, just got Iron for Bardo, but he's on Marty Supreme, and I think he worked on Uncut Gems. Claudia Miranda, who got snubbed from that Oscar, it could maybe pop up for F1. He did show up here in the Guild for Maverick, but that would be 4 nominations for Claudia Miranda.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's too many.
Yeah.
We talked about Ballad of a Small Player, sort of maybe surprising here because they just happen to really like
Edward Berger films.
Yeah, Edward Berger films they think are very visually told, and it seems like he is really tapping into what they like to see, and this is a whole new DP for him. Seamus McGarvey got a great shortlist mention at the Oscars.
That would be amazing.
Which would be fantastic, but I really doubt it happens. And then you have like some Oscar shortlist movies. I don't know if they can show up. I mean, Wicked for Good got mentioned at the shortlist, and Wicked 1 was nominated here at the Guild.
Yeah.
Can they really nominate Alice Brooks twice? I don't know.
I'm not sure about it.
Especially since there's still some controversy there, right? And then you have sort of a few foreign films that showed up at the Oscar shortlists and could potentially surprise here. Sound of Falling did well at the Camera Image, and they like to have that crossover, and you've seen it, and you think it's really good. We've talked about SIRÄT. Sentimental Value got an Oscar shortlist mention. Can you imagine if Sentimental Value showed up here at the Guild? That would just go to show you how strong Sentimental Value is as a movie.
Right. I think the one to watch out for is something like Nouvelle Vague.
Right. I mean, because they do like to include movies that incorporate black and white. Like even last year, there was no strictly black and white film. But if you consider all the infrared footage they had for Dune, you know, it's something that it's just going to pop out to them. Someone that I'd love to see here is 28 Years Later. I'm not sure it's going to happen.
Right.
But yeah, I watch out for that last spot on this list to go to a movie that's not going to factor in whatsoever.
Or and possibly show up here and then muster its way into the final 5, because it just shows that there's a strong contingent of DPs that want to celebrate that DP work or that DP.
Right. I also think it's kind of fun because this year we don't have like a huge iconic name. Like Ed Lockman was able to get in last year for Maria, but it's a lot of it is because he's Ed Lockman, right? We don't have Deakins this year. We don't have Lubeski. We don't have Lockman. And so there's a lot of like these really iconic names in cinematography that are not going to be vying for a spot. And maybe that will compel them to, you know, accept the 5 that I think are favored right now.
Consensus.
Yeah. Right. So that's who we're predicting.
And now moving on to our predictions for the DGA, the Directors Guild of America, which will reveal its nominees this week as well. I think there's some favorites here that should very much show up. I think Paul Thomas Anderson is certainly the favorite to win here and will definitely get his 3rd DGA nomination, the other 2 being Licorice Pizza and There Will Be Blood. He was unfortunately snubbed for everything else. And then we have Sinners, which would be Ryan Coogler's first inclusion here, time. And the DGA. And we have Chloe Zhao returning for Hamnet. Right. And she will join a very, 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 very small group of female filmmakers to get double noms here, the others being Jane Campion, Greta Gerwig, and Catherine Bigelow.
Right.
Then I think it gets a little trickier. I think that the DGA hasn't been, as we've been discussing, prone to embracing too many foreign films into their select 5. And so I think the smart money is that at the Oscars, those final 2 spots will be Sentimental Value, and it was just an accident, even though you and I question strongly Chloe Zhao making the final 5.
Right.
But consensus would say that those are the other 2 to make into the final 5 and then possibly get into the DGA. I say that we should pick one of the foreign films.
Right.
It should be either Sentimental Value or it was just an accident, not both.
Now, can you imagine, because this has been sort of our sort of narrative all year long for you and me, at least, is, you know, are we going to have subpar movies make it into these categories at the Oscars and round them out? Or are we going to get passionate votes for international films and we're going to see the most international Oscars ever of all time? And it's not necessarily for us a question of, can Neon get 5 movies into foreign film? It's, can Neon get 1 or 2 movies into categories throughout, whether it's below the line or above the line? Right. And so it'll be interesting. Can you imagine if the DJ list does include the consensus 5 and it's Sentimental Value and Jafar Panahi? Like you can sort of that could be a sign that yes, we're on the route to having the most international Oscars of all time.
Of all time.
Right. But I think that you and I are sort of, being a little conservative here and saying one international film. Right. Emilia Perez did get in last year with Netflix, right? But I mean, this is a guild where Anatomy of a Fall did not make it in.
Right.
The Zone of Interest did not make it in.
Right.
Right. And so of the two, who are you thinking is the better to make it in?
I think that, again, if you know Jafar Panahi's work, it's very stripped down, it's very bare, and still incredibly potent. But I think they like things that are a little bit showier. And I feel like there's a, Ingmar Bergman-esque vibe to Sentimental Value in a way.
Good shout out.
That I think would make me side with Sentimental Value being the film that gets in here for the Directors Guild.
I also kind of like that more guild members are going to be probably familiar with his work because he did get that nomination for the Oscars for the worst person in the world. And again, it is a foreign film, but there's
some English in it.
It's so weird because, there's a lot of English in it, I would say. A good percentage is in English. It's going to immediately appeal to modern times, contemporary times. It feels very, I don't know, relevant to, it almost feels like an American indie film in some ways. And so I think they're going to enjoy that. You have these actors that have crossed, like Stellan Skarsgård is an actor of an international scale. And so like you're going to have as many American viewers and guild members that are familiar with him as those abroad, right? And so I think you're right. Sentimental Value is the one that should feel safest.
Right.
If you're going to take out Jafar Panahi, where do we go? For sort of a DGA friendly list.
Right. And if we're taking away other foreign film possibilities like SIRÄT and The Secret Agent.
Which could still possibly surprise at the Oscars, right?
100%. I think we came up to the conclusion that we're left with mostly 3 films to choose from for that last spot. And it would be Guillermo del Toro for Frankenstein, Josh Safdie for Marty Supreme, and Clint Bentley for Train Dreams.
Okay, so like the 3 sort of American films that are like vying for spots 6.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Certainly, there's, again, the scope of Frankenstein might be enough, and he's beloved in the industry. That, I just think a lot of people consider him to be one of our, modern day cinema fathers. In a way. So I think that respect could go a long way to landing him in the final 5 here for the DGA. But I think the recency bias of Marty Supreme, as we've been discussing, might go a long way. It was really peaking around the time that they were voting with box office, critical acclaim, preview screenings. So I think the recency bias might propel Marty Supreme into that final spot for Josh Safdie.
I think that's a really strong choice. I will say, and we'll talk about it as the show goes on, but like usually we've looked at it, and most of the time, A24, when they're campaigning, their inclusion at the DGA and is sort of tied in to their inclusion at the SAG. And so like if you look at a film like Moonlight or Everything Everywhere All at Once, or even Minari, it gets both. And so this could be a very good week for Marty Supreme because it could end up getting nominated for the Producers Guild, the Directors Guild, the SAG Ensemble, or it could maybe be a little bit of a downswing and maybe people did not watch it with enough time. So we're sort of saying, did it peak at just the right time, or are people a little bit late because, the majority of the voting happened before this whole, before it's scored 56 million at the box office.
Right.
And so I know The Brutalist last year was the rare A24 title to score a nomination at the Directors Guild and not get on a SAG Ensemble. I think you and I go back and forth, and we'll talk about it on the show, about the SAG possibilities from Marty. Can Marty score a Directors Guild nomination on a SAG nomination? Maybe. Does Josh have to show up here to be nominated for an Oscar? No, because Lenny Abrahamson got in for Room without a mention here.
Right.
And so despite A24 has a better track record at the Oscars Best Director category than at the Directors Guild Award, is what I'm saying.
Right.
And so you're giving the edge to him over Guillermo.
Yes.
Which I think is really interesting because Guillermo is such an iconic figure of the industry now, but he only has 1 nomination here. Isn't that too few?
Yeah. I think that's a good argument for, spoiling the list. Yeah. I wonder if something like Train Dreams, is it too indie too much of a Sundance indie to get in here, especially with alongside, something like Sentimental Value, which I think you made an astute comparison to, kind of, has this indie vibe to it as well. I wonder if that's too small to get in here.
But I do like that it's a period piece. Like I almost like that the three movies we're between are like these big scale films. I kind of wonder if, again, that the aspect of it being a Mary Shelley adaptation, as you've said before and in other contexts, if that's going to give the edge to Guillermo. And I feel like the campaign is sort of, it keeps highlighting this idea about Guillermo being this massive voice against, reckless use of AI. And I feel like that's going to appeal to a lot of voters. So my gut says that it's probably not going to be Josh, and that it's probably going to end up being Guillermo, because I think he needs to have more nominations. And like, I think the campaign has done a good job of sort of painting this as the passion project that he's been chasing for years. Right. So I think it's going to end up being close. I will say that if it does get in, we've always had this idea about Frankenstein being a strong contender for like screenplay. I think whoever gets in here in the final five, they should fare really well in screenplay. I'm not sure we think Guillermo has enough fuel in the tank to finally make this five, because again, whoever comes up in the five is going to eventually have to come up against Jafar Panahi or one of those other foreign films. But I do think where we're at in the race right now, I think Guillermo should be able to get this final spot.
And you don't think Clint Bentley could be a surprise here?
I think if Clint Bentley gets this nomination here, it would be huge. And I think it would sort of signal that Train Dreams is going to do better than we think. Because I think most people are pegging Train Dreams for 4 nominations? Something like that, maybe 4.
Yeah.
I would say that if Clint Bentley gets this nomination, the movie should score 7.
I just wonder how often the sort of American independent film of the year kind of doesn't get recognized. Again, Sentimental Value might, kind of bridge that and a foreign kind of experience, cinema aesthetic. But just true and blue American independent film that's nominated at Independent Spirit Awards, that was nominated at the Gotham Awards, that is possibly, if you look at the top 8, the independent film that isn't a foreign film and that isn't a big budget film, because even Hamnet doesn't count. If that film, if it's Train Dreams, if that should go unnoticed by these awards bodies, that's a question mark.
I think that's an excellent point. And it's certainly, for all of the vibes that Sentimental Value has, it is possibly, it's carrying the banner for the best independent film of the year on the American side, right? It's been doing that ever since Sundance. And it's only solidified more. And so like this could be an excellent week of Guild nominations for Train Dreams. And they're writing the whole idea where like, shouldn't they have been nominated last year for Sing Sing, the same team? And so I could definitely see that happening. And if it does happen, I think it's major. I think it's interesting that we're like also between 2 Netflix movies, Frankenstein and Train Dreams. But I do think like everyone should remember the 5 films listed here should be the 5 favorite for Best Picture at the Oscars, right? That's the whole point of the DGA, is to spell who the favorites are, not necessarily for Best Director at the Oscars, but for the Best Picture. And so I think that we're sort of sensing Marty Supreme is breaking late, but it could crash the 5. But had Marty Supreme maybe underdone a little bit of the box office, then maybe Frankenstein would have comfortably fit there, with Train Dreams being a spoiler. So look out for those. I think consensus on the 4. You're saying Marty on the 5th. I'm saying
I'm going to go safe with Marty, but as we're talking, I'm feeling, a little bit more positive about Train Dreams. Surprising.
Interesting, because I feel like this is Guillermo's to lose. This is his spot to lose. All right, and so let's take a look at the Producers Guild Awards, which should announce this week also. And so we've talked about the DGA and how that sort of reflects a top 5 for the Oscar Best Picture category. The PGA is going to reflect, it's going to do a better job of reflecting the 10 spots, right? I think last year, how many did they get right?
I believe last year they got 8 right.
They
missed Nickel Boys, and I'm Still Here.
Right. And I think instead they had nominated Real Pain, which was really close, and September 5th, which we thought maybe was going to break with just enough time to sneak in.
Yeah.
But these choices are really good. Like the year before in 2023, they had all 10.
That was a weird year, though, like, where a lot of people were getting the top 10, right?
Yeah, it was a weird year because like a strong consensus had formed, whether it was, among Zone of Interest, Past Lives, Barbenheimer. So I think this year I think we should maybe expect 8 of these movies to make it into the Oscar Best Picture.
I like 8, and I like, the top 8, which I think are undisputably the top 8.
Right.
Those are, I think, the easiest ones to predict. So that's Sinners, One Battle After Another, Hamnet, Sentimental Value, Frankenstein, Marty Supreme, Begonia, and Train Dreams.
I think,
or rather, actually, I think I overstepped there. We're going to talk about Begonia, but it's Train Dreams. Sinners, One Battle, Hamnet, Sentimental, Frankenstein, Marty, and Train Dreams.
All right, so then 7.
7.
There's 7 that you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
I will say we're still on like our trend watch, which is how many international films can get in here. We did see last year the inclusion of Emilia Perez, but they did not put I'm Still Here. But the year before, where they got 10 right, notice they got 10 right. They included more international films. They did list Zone of Interest and Anatomy of a Fall. So we definitely feel comfortable about Sentimental Value making it into the top 7 as an international film. Right.
The question is if it's going to be more than one.
The question is, can it be more than one? We know that the favorite right now to finish, in Best Director and possibly the Best Picture 5, typically at the Oscars would probably be Jafar Panahi's movie. But I think my gut impression is that the film is going to be too quiet and too much of a contemporary piece to make it in here. I don't know if you agree.
No, I think that's very possible, yeah.
I think it'll get out-muscled by bigger, Hollywood fare, if that makes sense. Then people talk about The Secret Agent, right? And I don't know if it peaked with enough time. You know what I mean? To me, The Secret Agent almost reads a little bit more like I'm Still Here, where it'll peak after Golden Globes night. I don't know if you, okay. or do you think The Secret Agent has a good shot of making it in here?
I think there's a retro appeal to The Secret Agent, which is an incredible film. If you guys haven't seen it, that I think a lot of PGA voters, especially male PGA voters, might respond to. I think that's going in its favor. So I think I wonder if it's the kind of year, that we're on track to have, as you were saying, the most, foreign films ever celebrated at the Oscars. If that should be reflected here at the PGA, almost as if it's unescapable. They're going to have to include at least one more foreign film.
Oh, I like that. So you're thinking that at least one more has to get in.
That's what my gut says right now.
I'm kind of thinking that maybe you agree, but SIRÄT probably might not be the one to get into the PGA. Do you agree with that?
For me, it's on a similar level as The Secret Agent. I still think that they're both better options than It Was Just an Accident.
Also, no matter what you think, It Was Just an Accident is a little bit lower on that end, possibly because it's a little bit more of a minimalist film. Right. Even though it is, again, the buzziest, right, of the 3.
Right.
Like after Sentimental Value, typical Oscar logic would sort of say that It Was Just an Accident is a top 5 movie and a top 5 director spot. If Producers Guild voters are aware of that, they can just, jot the film down, even if it is not necessarily what you and I would, think is something that would traditionally appeal for them, whether it's the sound and the cinematography, the location shooting, the costume designing, the production design of either SIRÄT or The Secret Agent. If they're aware that it is, a film that is favored to get in, they can put it in. Sort of like, it's maybe it's a good example like Past Lives. Like, it's tremendously produced and it's produced between 2 countries, which I think helped to get that spot, right? But it's also a very quiet film, a very nuanced film, very subtle film. The benefit of Past Lives that I think you and I agree It Was Just an Accident does not have is, again, produced between 2 countries, killer films, Christine Vachon, but also money. Like it made good money here. I mean, It Was Just an Accident came out in October and like no one even
it didn't even come out here.
Exactly. I barely made a dent anywhere, right? Obviously, maybe they have bigger plans for an expansion this year after it gets a Best Picture nomination. But so I think one film that you sort of we had mentioned, right, as the 8th film, because it should be comfortable at the same time. Like, it hasn't gotten enough push to break into definitively the top 10 at the same time, and hasn't been ignored enough to take it out. It sort of fits enough of the bill to include it. Would be Begonia, right? And so it got the Golden Globe nomination for Best Picture, right? It did well at the European Film Awards, right? It got, I think, like 6 nominations or something like that. They're familiar with Yorgos, right? Yeah. Obviously, Emma Stone, they like a lot. So it would make sense to include Begonia. Begonia it did pretty well at the box office too. I mean, the budget was pretty high, but it's close to 20 mil. So it's not bad, respectable.
I mean, I think the budget's like 80.
I think the
50
budget,
to 80.
I think the budget is 50, but the American box office receipts are almost at 20. It's on streaming now. But it seems like the kind of film that they could respect enough to be nominated, right? I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah. But I liked the crossover that you explained to me the other day about Golden Globe, Best Pictures, and PGA.
Usually, I think what we've been seeing over the last few years, last 4 years maybe, is that a lot of the PGA nominees should come out of the Golden Globe Best Picture nominees. So sort of like the Producers Guild voters, the first thing they're referencing to finish their top 10 is looking at whoever got nominated at the Golden Globes. Right. And Begonia did get that nomination. And some films, that should be favored here did not get that nomination. So is that going to inspire Producer Guild voters to say, I want to include these movies that were snubbed at the Golden Globes? Or are they going to take the sort of attitude of the Golden Globes and say those films were just not good enough? And so what were some of those films? Those films were...
the two that come to mind are Wicked for Good and Avatar Fire and Ash.
Which were both nominated. Like Way of Water was nominated at the PGA. Wicked 1 was nominated at the PGA. But they were also Golden Globe Best Picture nominees. This year, the Golden Globe said no to both.
Despite giving Wicked 5 nominations.
Yeah, despite giving it 5 nominations, it still said, we're not going to nominate you for Best Picture in favor of Nouvelle Vague and Blue Moon. Right? And so are the voters at the PGA going to feel the same way?
Right.
Which is kind of tough because those are two of your bigger box office movies. And the list could use that. I mean, we have Sinners, but those two are the bigger box office movies. When you look at movies that got in...
but like we've been talking about it, these voters for the PGA are not, averse to choosing a different kind of film to be nominated as opposed to a money-making film. I think about House of Gucci, where everyone was predicting that was definitely going to get a PGA nomination in 2021, I believe. And it still missed. Right. And why? Because the quality just wasn't up to par.
Right.
So they're not averse to excluding films that they think are just not at that level quality-wise.
I think that's a solid point. And I think that's going to be an argument for keeping Avatar and Wicked off the list this year. I do wonder if money is going to become a factor. You have some other blockbusters, like, for example, F1. But I do think that the times that you don't have a Golden Globe Best Picture nominee making it into the PGAs, what you usually see is a few more other films that got nominated for a Golden Globe. So like one film that we had thought early on had a good chance here, and I still think on paper it fits the bill, is Nuremberg, right? It made decent amount of money, was shot relatively cheap, has good historical context, but it didn't get on for any Golden Globes, which kind of puts it at a disadvantage, right? But some movies that were able to get a Golden Globe nomination and then leverage that into a PGA nomination included The Whale, Black Panther, and so Avatar is still a Golden Globe nominee. F1 is a Golden Globe nominee, technically. Right. Weapons is a Golden Globe nominee because Amy Madigan got in.
I like Weapons.
I mean, I think Weapons is a dark horse because it made a good amount of money, right?
Yeah.
And it would be really interesting to see Weapons here in one of the final spots. I think, in my gut at least, despite not having...
But for example, why wouldn't they say, it's just in my opinion, so for example, I think one reason, as you're insinuating, we like Begonia is because if we're not going to consider Golden Globe Best Picture nominees like SIRÃT, Secret Agent, Blue Moon,
No Other Choice,
Nouvelle Vague, we're left with less films, among them Begonia.
Yeah, I think if you take away the films that we haven't put in the PGA top 10 yet, and you take away the foreign films that were nominated for the Golden Globes, you're sort of left between couple interesting movies. Begonia, right? Which could just be liked enough to finally get there and squeak into the top 10.
Yeah.
Here and at the Oscars, in theory. And you have Blue Moon, right? Which we're saying is looking like a stronger contender for Ethan Hawke to win Best Actor.
100%. But I also think there's an aspect to Blue Moon that, at least we've talked to some people who feel like the film is kind of static. They were a little bit, lack of a better term, bored by the film. Stagey. And sorry, the film is very well done. And I do expect it to do well at the Oscars more than people are expecting, but I don't think that this is a place where it would do well. The PGA.
At the PGA, because again, it is not necessarily, the most produced film, right? And so that kind of leaves us just with Begonia.
Yeah.
And I think the lowest we've gone over the past 4 years with Best Picture nominees, the Golden Globe Best Picture nominees crossover with the Golden Globes is 8. In 2022, they had 8 films from the Golden Globes Best Picture get in. And so with Begonia, we would have
7.
No, I think we have 8.
No, because Train Dreams didn't get nominated for.
Oh, that's right. We'd only have 7 because Train Dreams got snubbed there. Yeah. So if we include those 7, which again is a low, but there's nowhere else to go, right? And we include Train Dreams because it did get an acting nomination at the Golden Globes, and it's a standout independent title. And kind of interestingly enough, Sing Sing did not get nominated here last year, and so maybe that could be a little bit of a makeup for the creative team behind Train Dreams. If we put that in, there's 8. We have only 2 more spots to go. The question is, does it break in favor of international films or box office films?
Right. And I also wonder, though, along those same lines, if, as I was mentioning earlier, we might still get an overlap of 8 films nominated for Golden Globes Best Picture, because it's the kind of year that stands to make history in regards to foreign films, that they're going to not have a choice, and they're going to have to include at least one other foreign film,
right?
Which would leave us with either another choice, it was just an accident, or what I think might be the best option, which is The Secret Agent.
Oh, wow. So The Secret Agent in this list.
I'm thinking about that. I wonder if that's going to be the 8th film that overlaps another foreign film.
I mean, there are some other films that could potentially show up. Like, we talk about Weapons, and it's not Golden Globe nomination for Amy Madigan. Jake Kelly on paper isn't a terrible PGA nominee, even though it again inexplicably missed the Golden Globe Best Picture nomination in favor of Blue Moon again. Could Jake Kelly maybe make it in here? Possibly. My gut at the end says that the last 2 spots are going to go to money. It's going to go to Avatar, Fire and Ash, and Wicked for Good. That's what my gut says.
I'm going to say that they're going to pull a 2023, and they're going to include another foreign film, either The Secret Agent or it was just an accident, one of those 2. And the final nominee will be a money-making film that we like. We liked this film, Weapons.
Oh, so I like that. I like that idea that the money, the film that's representing the box office is going to be an original film, a surprising film, a film in profit, a horror film. That would be a huge get for Weapons. I think you had said something about what do they care about? They're not going to have any bias against nominating Weapons because look at Deadpool.
Yeah.
Now, granted, the Weapons money is nowhere near the Deadpool money, but it's still really good. I mean, again, the film should be healthily in profit.
Right.
So, I mean, between potentially a PGA nomination here for Weapons and maybe a surprise showing at the SAG, it could be a great week for Weapons.
Right. Exactly.
So you're going to go with a foreign film.
A foreign film to meet that 8 crossover between Golden Globe Best Picture and PGA. And I don't know, I just feel like they don't have to settle for Avatar or for Wicked. They can just put something like Weapons that made money and is an original product. So and in the event that it wasn't Weapons, they'd have to choose between Avatar and Wicked. And I wonder if Avatar has the edge because of its sort of technological innovation.
John Landau also.
John Landau.
The late John Landau.
Exactly. Right now I'm going to go with Weapons and a foreign film.
I've liked it. I've always said that Weapons this should be like a great week for Weapons, between a nomination for SAG Ensemble, possibly a nomination at the Producers Guild Award, a Writers Guild nomination. So even if Weapons can't make it all the way, the guilds that gave nominations to Deadpool, a nomination to A Quiet Place, a nomination to Crazy Rich Asians, they should embrace the film.
Yeah, 100%.
So we'll see if that happens. I kind of like that. I can't, shake off the idea that you'll just see money squeeze in here, and the final 2 spots will end up going to Avatar and Wicked.
Okay, and now we're going to go to our predictions for the SAG nominees, which will also be revealed this week. The SAG is a crucial award because they'll get at least, more often than not, around 15 people correct in their acting categories. And if you can solve the key of the acting categories, I think solving the keys of all the other races becomes easier.
Mm-hmm.
At least that's the way that I like to look at it. I think the SAG is crucial, and I think a lot of voters who are voting are looking at the SAG, what the union voted for, and taking their cues from there. So I would say that the SAG is always something I look forward to, not because they have great nominees. A lot of times it's a mixed bag, but because it's very revealing as to who is on their radar, who's not, who needs to fight a little harder, who can relax a little bit. And I think the puzzle pieces will start becoming clearer as to who stands to miss and who stands to take those places.
And there are definitely movies that will appeal more to SAG. So for example, look for, maybe some more middle of the road conservative biographical stuff. I remember when, for example, Jennifer Hudson got in for Respect, right? And that can sort of happen, right? And then the other thing is, I think you had said that depending on how the SAG votes, it's maybe going to give us a little bit of insight as to maybe how many solo nominees we'll have,
Mm-hmm.
right? And maybe how many partners will get in. I mean, we talked about last year when Timothée Chalamet got in with the actress who played Joan Baez in supporting actress, Monica Barbaro, exactly. So it sort of lets us know, maybe, are they going to prioritize putting a real person in? I don't think, for example, that if the SAG puts X amount of real people, I think the Oscars are going to try to at least repeat a percentage of that,
mm-hmm.
right? And so those are some insights that you've talked about in the past, right? That the nominees should reveal.
Right. And I think that even the set of 20 actors, it'll still become clear, who is, who's weaker and who's more vulnerable to a snub,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to those who I think are stronger and very unlikely to get a snub. They're not going to be perfect. Don't expect them to be perfect. And in fact, there are some head-scratching conservative picks every year.
Mm-hmm.
But more often than not, those conservative picks tend to be the ones that are most vulnerable.
Right.
Don't expect out-of-the-box picks like Amanda Seyfried in the Testament of Anne Lee or Wagner Moura for The Secret Agent, even though those would be big gets if they did get it.
Mm-hmm.
Expect, something more conservative for, some selections. But overall, I really like this award because I really feel like I start to really be able to see what the final 20 are going to be.
Right. You look at it as a 20-piece puzzle.
Yeah. And I can already kind of sense, where are the weaknesses here?
Yeah.
And certain contenders really need a bump here.
Right.
To, I think, solidify their campaign and their status in the race.
Right. It's sort of like a macro view, right? Because since you're looking at it as a 20-piece puzzle as opposed to a 5-piece puzzle, it lets you know, for example, which movie has, pieces in more than one category or more than 2 categories, or where was maybe a very popular film left off. Remember when Killers of the Flower Moon had a piece in ensemble, a piece in supporting actor and supporting actress, but they decided to leave off Leo DiCaprio. Right. So all those things are what you're saying could be revealing.
Right. So I'm going to be very curious to see this year's group of nominees. Also, their best ensemble category, as of late, certainly. I mean, in the past, if you look at their history, they've had some really interesting choices, but as of late, their ensemble category is like their best picture category. Mm-hmm. So expect films that don't necessarily have large ensembles to possibly get spotlighted here, right? Because for them, it's a best picture award.
It's an equivalent to a best picture nomination. Right. I mean, I think that's interesting. I think let's kick off and talk about ensemble. I think before we begin, another overarching trend that we've been talking about as we've been speaking about these Guild nominations that come out this week. Again, how well are international films going to do here? Let's start with ensemble, and I'll start by saying international films have been known to sort of perform poorly here. Yes. Right? A number of international films that get into the eventual Best Picture list, whether it's Zone of Interest or Anatomy of a Fall, they tend not to pick up a nomination here. So like, for example, last year, Emilia Perez was a little bit of an outlier. Parasite won this category. That was also an outlier. Can we see a foreign film here? I think it's very possible. Let's start by saying that the two most safe movies and the two movies that should be battling, I think, for the win should be Sinners.
And One Battle After Another.
And One Battle After Another, two Warner Brothers movies. And so we really only have 3 open spots. Right. I don't know who you think, who in your gut you feel is safest after that.
I mean, considering the options that we do have and the kind of year that it's been, and it's a very foreign language heavy film, as we've been stating earlier in the podcast, I would look for them to prioritize a Best Picture favorite that doesn't necessarily have, again, a huge ensemble, but it's a top 3 movie, and that's Hamnet, which is odd because it's not a huge cast. I really feel like they're 3 adults and like 3 kids.
3 adults? Who was the third adult in that?
Emily Watson, who gets a
little bit. Not an adult.
No, yeah, she gets she gets a moment. She might get a BAFTA nom at the end of the day. And then the performances from the children.
It really feels like
and Noah Jupe, as Hamlet. My point is that
it's certainly not ensemble feeling.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like an ensemble. It's very much would fit into, like, for example, giving The Theory of Everything an ensemble nomination when that felt like a 2-hander.
Yeah.
But again, what matters is their favorites, the top Best Picture picks, and that some of the other picks aren't necessarily their cup of tea either. So when we think of something like Frankenstein, is that really their cup of tea? Not necessarily. Train Dreams, not necessarily. So I like it for that reason. Competition, and it's a top 3 Best Picture movie.
I think something that's sort of interesting there that you can sort of allude to is the Shakespeare element, maybe. We know Shakespeare in Love did well here, but Shakespeare actors, could that be something that maybe gives it an edge here?
Yeah. So I would say Hamnet. And then I think, as we were stating with the PGA, I think it's the kind of year where I think nominating a foreign language film is unavoidable because so many of the strongest contenders are foreign language films. And so I would go with the, I guess, easier foreign language film to spotlight here, and that's Sentimental Value. There's some English in it. I think that helps. There's some American presence / filmmakers. Actors that filmmakers are and other actors are aware of, like Stellan Skarsgård. So I would look for something like Sentimental Value to place here as well, even though, again, that's, in a way, a good ensemble because everyone gets a place to shine. Maybe in another way, not a great ensemble because it's really a chamber piece of 4 actors.
Right. I mean, I think we have another element here, not unlike Hamnet's, right? Where, again, since it is sort of about the industry and about actors, could that be yet another advantage for this movie?
Yeah, you're right. That's a really good point. I think that'll help. That last spot is the trickiest spot for me. I feel pretty good about those 4. That last spot is tricky because, let's see, they would welcome something like Wicked, which got nominated last year. In fact, I think it was among, if not the most nominated film that year. We got 4 nominations. They would nominate Wicked, except the SAG is not great at repeating often. I know the Lord of the Rings trilogy did get nominated all 3 times, I believe, for cast ensemble. Yeah. Which is no small thing. But again, when we talk about Wicked for Good, that's not Lord of the Rings territory because the second one, very, significantly underperformed the first one in terms of critical acclaim. How far reaching is that? How many actors feel that way? Or will actors do similar to what they did in 2021 with House of Gucci and I Don't Care, I Enjoyed It, so I'm nominating it for 5 things. Right. I don't sense that because even if Lord of the Rings was able to repeat 3 times back to back, there certainly weren't repeat nominations for actors in those movies. So Ian McKellen didn't get nominated repeatedly for all 3, etc. Right. So I certainly expect if there is a presence of the Wicked franchise in this ceremony, there will be a dip. There won't be 4 nominees. Oh, yeah. Maybe it's just an ensemble nomination and no acting. Right. Maybe it's an acting or 2 and no ensemble nomination. Maybe it's nothing.
The other question is how out of favor could Wicked for Good have fallen to go from what was already a high of, I think, 4 nominations. 4. How few could it go here? And could it even go to 0? That's something that I think we're all thinking about. So certainly Wicked is there. I mean, if this is the equivalent of the Actors Union declaring what their 5 favorite films are, we know that obviously they're going to choose films that cater to actors. So don't expect, Avatar to show up the same way that you shouldn't necessarily expect, Gravity to show up. But I mean, what about Frankenstein? I mean, Frankenstein seems like it's solidifying itself as one of the top 5 movies that are in the English language.
Well, tying a little bit of, Frankenstein with Wicked for Good on another, one other note I wanted to mention was that, since SAG-AFTRA expanded, the group itself, I think is more prone to, being welcoming of populist picks than they might have been 20 years ago, 10 years ago. So that's something to keep in mind. I think there are, possibly even influencers to a certain degree, to a certain extent, who might even be able to vote for this award. So it's always a good, advice to consider films that were popular, and that many people saw, and that, not necessarily have to be among the most critically revered films of the year. In fact, I think that's something that really helped the first Wicked, something that helped something like House of Gucci, something that helped, Crazy Rich Asians. You should, consider a populist pick amongst this group. That being said, there is something like Sinners already part of the group, which I think is a popular film that a lot of people saw and admire. Do they need to put something like Wicked? I'm unsure. On the note of Frankenstein, I think that's also a film that a lot of people saw and liked and could be popular. And I think because of those reasons, it stands on a possibility of breaking into this group, the top 5. However, it's period, it's lengthy, it's an adaptation, it's fantasy driven, which we already have a little bit of that in Sinners. Right. Could I see that? Can I see Frankenstein fitting in here? I'm not confident.
Well, let me name drop just a few more movies that at least were sort of in the periphery that we were considering before we come up to, I think, the final movie that we sort of settled upon. Obviously, there are the international films, and they could also be The Secret Agent and No Other Choice, that they're handicapped here, unlike Sentimental Value, which again, borders on being an American independent film and has a lot of things that are going to immediately appeal to a more general movie-going American audience. I think moving away from Nouveau Vague and things like that, there's maybe something to be said about, Jay Kelly, which is about an actor, maybe something to be said about Begonia, right? Emma Stone is in that, and Jesse Plemons. I think obviously Blue Moon is too much of a one-person thing. At one point, Nuremberg looked really good, but it missed all the Golden Globes. I don't think that's a killer, but Russell Crowe does really well here. It wouldn't be a shock to me. Other outlier things that at least occurred to me were, for example, Rental Family. They would probably appeal to them. Something like The Life of Chuck, for example. I wouldn't completely count out The Long Walk, things like that, but it seems like they lack a lot of steam. There's something about the SAGs, about how they've sort of not just embraced populist picks, as you've said, but there's this kind of trend that we've noticed about, them sort of rallying around a film directed by an actor. And one of those that comes to mind at the forefront is Bradley Cooper's film, Is This Thing On? Right? Which probably should have been a bigger thing. It's not. Could it pop up here somewhere? Maybe it's not an ensemble. Maybe one of the other categories. It's something to be aware of. But, whether it's A Real Pain, directed by Jesse Eisenberg, right? Or whether it's One Night in Miami, directed by Regina King, Lady Bird, directed by Greta Gerwig, even something like Captain Fantastic, directed by Matt Ross. There's something about SAG actors, union actors, sort of rallying around these films directed by a fellow performer that sometimes, you tend to at least see a little bit of residue or DNA from that throughout, at least pop up once or twice during nominations. I mean, Is This Thing On is one of them. But the final film that I think we sort of settled on was maybe Zach Cregger's film, Weapons.
Yeah.
Right? And so what do you think may appeal to them? he gave up its that nomination.
I certainly like that it's very cast driven. You know, there are a lot of actors in it. Each one kind of gets their own chapter and their own ability to shine. I like that it was a massive hit, so it has that populist factor. I think it's a film that a lot of people saw.
Yeah.
I think it's a critically acclaimed film, unlike a film like, for example, Wicked for Good. And I worry about the fantasy elements for the film, especially then, you know, we already have one in Sinners. Maybe they want to try something different. There also isn't a lot of diversity in that movie. I believe most of the actors are white. Maybe the principal isn't.
Right.
They
all do have some previous nominations. You got Josh Brolin. Right.
Right. And so they're known actors. They're, I think, respected actors. Some of them are character actors. And it was a huge hit that I think most people saw. So those are the main reasons.
Right. I think also it helps to remember that this is the same award show that gave, a win to Emily Blunt for A Quiet Place, where she barely said a word, right? And so I do think that genre does well here, right? And I do think that Weapons is the unique genre picture that relies on an ensemble of actors. And I also think, just marrying that idea of ensemble, widely seen genre, populist pick, and a critically acclaimed film and then also the idea that Amy Madigan could potentially be a strong contender to win supporting actress. I think that may give it an edge. And again, Zach Cregger, who's known for his work on The Whitest Kids You Know, and has worked in front of the camera, not just behind the camera. I think that could maybe end up being something that helps the film pop a little bit.
I agree 100%. Would I be shocked if it doesn't get in? No, I won't. Like I said, we already have a little bit of genre here, enough with Sinners, who I think is the favorite to win this category. But it's also something that makes sense. Feels like something that they would do, especially if the best thing you're giving me is, Wicked for Good or Frankenstein or a foreign film or Begonia.
Right.
I'm not sure that Weapons couldn't take those movies on for this final spot.
Right. And even something like Jake Kelly, for example, again, I understand how it's tough with Jake Kelly because I feel like it could appeal to as many voters as it, turns off, right? Because as an actor, they like seeing films that tackle the subject of acting, but when the whole thing sort of falls on the shoulder of, celebrity and things like that, I've always thought that it's going to be a little bit more of a risky play. Right.
And then the other film that I think is a favorite to get in here that we considered was Marty Supreme. But as we said earlier on the show, I do feel that's a film that's really anchored around one person. Those films tend to not get nominated for Best Ensemble Cast. Think again of Adrian Brody and, The Brutalist.
There Will Be Blood.
Daniel Day-Lewis and There Will Be Blood, Frances McDormand and Nomadland.
Yeah.
Those films by no means had poor casts. They had very good casts.
Yeah.
But they don't necessarily draw the eye to the cast.
Right.
There are, again, a lot of ostentatious choices for casting in Marty Supreme.
Yeah, it might be a complication.
Right. Might be a complication for them. They might, it might feel weird to nominate a film that has, Mr. Wonderful in it for Best Cast Ensemble. Gwyneth Paltrow, haven't seen her in a while. Desazion, she's just trying to break out.
Tyler, the Creator.
So, Tyler, the Creator. So it's very eclectic, but that might be a con.
Right.
In this instance,
Fran Drescher's in it.
Fran Drescher, right? She used to be the president,
right?
But for some reason, the unorthodox casting of it all.
Looking at history, I will say that to your point, it doesn't seem like I can quote a time that happened before. I think about something like Licorice Pizza that had Alana Haim in it, and I believe it had Tom Waits in it.
Yeah, had a great cast.
Had a fantastic cast.
I only got one thing.
It didn't get nominated for ensemble, and it's very ensemble.
Yeah,
it certainly is very ensemble-y.
Yeah.
But there's just something about that idea of, as an actor, when you vote for Best Ensemble, I think part of the fun is to nominate actors that you know of, that you look up to, that you've worked with in the past.
Exactly, yeah.
And there's a lot about Marty Supreme that that's not the case, because you're sort of casting from outside the traditional actor pool. Right. And so I think that's why we're sort of sidelining it.
Right.
Even though technically, if it does get honored for a DGA, and usually for an A24 film, a DGA nomination accompanies a SAG Ensemble nomination. So
except for The Brutalist last year.
Exactly, except for The Brutalist, and it made sense for The Brutalist. Right. And I will say that Marty Supreme is more casty than The Brutalist. The Brutalist is like a three-hander, and Marty Supreme is a one-man show with a bunch of great cameos.
Yeah, exactly. So we're going with weapons.
All right, so then why don't you talk to us a little bit about the category of Best Actress?
Well, Best Actress is a very interesting category because I think there's only two safe people, and that's Jessie Buckley, and that's also Renate Reinsve for Sentimental Value.
Should be the rare sort of foreign language performance to get in.
Yeah, we've seen that happen as of late. Zoe Saldana and got in with Carlos Sofia Gascon last year, but we shouldn't see too many of those. Mm-mm. So I would caution listeners to not expect there to be, Wagner Moura and Renate Reinsve and Inga Ibsatir
and Lee
Byung-eun. That's not going to happen.
Now, if
that
it
might
does
happen at the Oscars, but it won't happen here.
But if it does happen at the SAG, then you know that again we're heading down that road of the most international Oscars ever.
Right, but it's uncharted territory, and we fully don't expect that to happen. But I think this is one spot where it will comfortably happen. Mm-hmm. I think actors remember her work from Worst Person in the World, and also she speaks some English here as well. Mm-hmm. And so I think those two are pretty safe.
She's an actor. She plays an actor.
She plays an actor and also a theater actor. I think those two are safe. It's about the other three spots that is interesting. Mm-hmm. I personally don't think that Cynthia Erivo will get nominated here. I think when you look at the individual acting categories, they're pickier about repeat nominations. And certainly Cynthia Erivo already has 2 nominations here in this in the SAG for
on the film
Harriet,
side,
for Harriet and for Wicked. She was just nominated last year. I personally don't see the urgency to nominate her this year, especially if she's not going to win, and especially if again the film is not what the first one was. Mm-hmm. Emma Stone makes sense. Because
she lost this award.
She lost this award in 2023. However, they might think that, if we're looking for contenders to fill these last 3 spots, and if they can't find anyone that they latch onto if they can't find someone to latch onto, then they could always fall for, liking Emma Stone and the commitment to the role. She shaved her head. Yeah. Even though I don't think Yorgos always does well with these with this group either, or it does just okay, not like the Academy Awards,
right?
Or the Golden Globes. So I think Emma Stone is an option, but I'm not convinced. I don't think someone like Amanda Seyfried in The Testament of Anne Lee will speak to them. I think it's too artsy for them. Chase Infinity is an interesting one. I think Chase Infinity might be able to squeak in, with One Battle After Another. But you and I were talking and we discussed how possibly, it might be too many nominations for One Battle After Another in this particular, group, the SAG award, the SAG committees. In a way, you and I are expecting several nominations at the Oscars, but here I think it should be more tame, and especially when we're considering the battle between One Battle After Another and Sinners. Maybe something like One Battle After Another shouldn't overshadow Sinners. So Sinners might get 3 actors nominated. Is it realistic to think that One Battle could get 5 actors nominated in this particular awards body? I'm not so sure that's realistic.
She's also very young in her career. Yeah. And she's not like shouldering the entire movie like Timothée Chalamet was when he got nominated for Call Me By Your Name.
Right.
So that might be a factor as well.
Right. I think someone that we landed on that we felt pretty confident after going through some of the factors was actually Tessa Thompson. Number one, I think she's an actor that's liked. Number 2, it gives them an opportunity to spotlight diversity in the category, which is something that I think is important to them, rightfully so. Mm-hmm. Number 3, Hedda Gabler is, an iconic seminal text
Right.
that I think actors are very familiar with and very responsive to.
Right.
I also think I think the idea of casting Tessa Thompson as Hedda Gabler and also the role reversal, the gender reversal with Nina Haas's character,
Right.
Are something that stands to appeal to them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a company that's associated to this film is Orion.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I were talking how it's a relatively, it's been revamped, and the revamp has been relatively new.
Right.
But as of late, their films tend to do well here. Think of American Fiction that did well here. Think of Woman Talking that still nabbed a nom here despite
Ensemble.
not getting an individual acting award.
Yeah.
So I feel like they tend to watch these films
Mm-hmm.
by Orion, which are very sort of driven by inclusivity and the kinds of films that I think that they respond to.
Right.
And again, Tessa Thompson has never been recognized here, and I think that they would be happy to recognize her.
Yeah, she is a Globe nominee.
Yeah, she's a Golden Globe nominee. And so for some reason, for these factors, we were really sensing that maybe people are sleeping on Tessa Thompson.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree, and it's kind of tough to see. It's as you said, Hedda Gabler is a role that's kind of like, I think someone called it the equivalent of, Hamlet. It's just one of those roles that so many actors get the opportunity to play, and they really look forward to making it their own. And Tessa Thompson did that. And I think there's just going to be an immense amount of respect for Tessa Thompson taking on that challenge, but also Nia DaCosta, the director, sort of, bringing her own energy to the piece. And so I would agree. I think that Tessa Thompson stands a really good chance of being nominated here.
Right. I would certainly, we think that people are sleeping on it. Don't sleep on it. I think that if Tessa Thompson gets a nomination here, it's humongous.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that with a Globe nomination and a SAG nomination, you certainly increase the chances that voters watch this film.
Right.
And if they see the film, I find it very hard for them to resist nominating Tessa Thompson, probably over someone like Jason Finity for One Bite After Another, and also nominate Nina Haas, who I know that they're eager to spotlight, to give a nomination to, and who probably got pretty close with Tar.
Right.
So if this happens, it's a huge thing for the Hedda campaign, and you could expect there to be even greater things on the other side of that nomination.
Right.
The other person that I really like is, they do tend to favor real life figures, especially in this awards body. Like you were saying, Jennifer Hudson and Respect, a plethora of other examples exist. And I think one of the best options this year is Kate Hudson and Song Sung Blue, a film that came out just recently over the holidays. You and I got a chance to see it. We weren't huge fans. It's sort of the kind of conservative pick that they respond to sometimes, like something like Respect.
Mm-hmm.
It's a real life figure, and in this particular case, it's a real life figure that goes through a tragedy. That I think certain actors are going to respond to as well. Mm-hmm. Kay Hudson hasn't been back here since Almost Famous, but she has been nominated as part of the ensembles for Almost Famous and 9. So she's a known face. Mm-hmm. And I think this is the kind of nomination that we expect to happen at the SAG, but to not repeat at the Oscars. Right. And she would comfortably replace someone like Amanda Seyfried, who possibly has a better chance of getting nominated for the Oscar, and much more challenging, ambitious work, and more, in my opinion, a stronger piece of work in The Testament of Anne Lee, but that just will not be the cup of tea of the SAG committee, I firmly believe. But you can replace her with Kate Hudson. For Song Sung Blue. So I'm liking Kate Hudson here as well.
I mean, I think that's an excellent point. I do think there's a little bit of the element working against Kate Hudson that there is against, for example, someone like Gwyneth Paltrow. They don't work very often. And that may be an element that keeps voters from wanting to put them up higher. I do like the real person factor. I, at one point, thought that could really work in the favor of someone like Lucy Liu. For Rosemead, and I still think there's a chance that she surprises here, only because not only is it based on a real individual, but I also think that sometimes this guild can really respond to like a a very surprising turn, an out of character turn. So like I do think of someone like Sarah Silverman, who turned in a performance in I Smile Back. At someone like Jennifer Aniston, who turned in the performance from Cake. There's Lucy Liu. You've never really seen her like this before. There's a lot of this performance that's actually subtitled. And so I do think
and some people might feel that way about Kate Hudson in this film.
I see, that's my thing, is that there's something about Kate Hudson in this film that she's working out that muscle that makes that she's working out that element that Kate Hudson brings to all her movies, but it's not a performance that's going to make you think of Kate Hudson differently. I think this is a performance that's going to make you think of Lucy Liu differently. So at the same time, because it is, being campaigned by Vertical, I think it's probably underseen. I think that's what really hurts it. But I do think there's a potential for that to happen. The same thing, I think June Squibb has an outside shot here because it is directed by an actor, Scarlett Johansson. Right. But also just the idea that June Squibb is so much older in her career. She's leading this film the same way that she was sort of like a dark horse for Thelma. It may be something that appeals to voters, right? I don't know if she may very well be the oldest nominee to get nominated for Best Actress, because remember, this group did not nominate Emmanuel Riva for Amour. So keep that in mind.
Yeah. I think she's a dark horse too.
She's certainly a dark horse. Is there anyone else that comes to your mind?
When you think about people like Julia Roberts and After the Hunt, I think they're going to dislike that film. So I think it has no chance. Jennifer Lawrence and Die My Love, terrific performance that deserves recognition, but there's no chance they like that film here. Sydney Sweeney and Christie, I think that could have been a possibility earlier on before, its box office struggles. It's really tough for that last spot, but in all honesty, I think one of the best options that we have, oddly enough, and I was surprised when we were going through the numbers, is Rose Byrne and If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. Again, there should be a number of solo nominees in this group. By that, I mean actors who are nominated, or the film's only nomination at the SAGs. So that's okay. We can have that happen here. And, considering the competition, for me, it was really that last option, being a sole nominee in the form of Rose Byrne for If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You, or being a sole nominee in the form of Emma Stone for Begonia. I think it's between those two for that last spot. I would say that Begonia, I think, is handicapped by the fact that Emma Stone was just there. And
it is the more widely seen one, though.
Right. That's true. Those are the assets. Those are the things going for an Emma Stone bid in this 5. That I do think Begonia was more seen than If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You. I think both films could be challenging depending on the voter that's watching them for the SAG committee. Mm-hmm. But I think that If I Had Legs, I'd Kick You would be a more challenging watch than Begonia.
Right.
Like you said, Begonia was more seen overall. I think that might play into it.
It'd be the third Focus Features girl, though.
That's the other thing. That since we already have Kate Hudson and we already have Jessie Buckley, a third Focus Features actress, I think is a little bit of a tougher sell, especially when Emma Stone was just there for another Yorgos film.
Right.
And they might feel like, we've done the Emma Stone thing for a while. We can chill, especially if it's a Yorgos film.
Right.
Which really leaves Rose Byrne, which again is odd because it's not the kind of film that I see them enjoying or liking.
Right.
But I think what could possibly fix that, or what could possibly, bridge that, is that she's a well-liked actor.
Right.
Who's actually never received an individual acting nomination by the SAG. Mm-hmm. She was nominated, I believe, as part of the ensemble for Damages a couple of times.
No, I think, actually, I don't think so. I think she was nominated as the ensemble of Bridesmaids.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So it's an opportunity to finally give her a nomination. Again, I do think she's an actor that is valued and appreciated. There's certainly a stretch here. And, even if it's a film that I think will be hard for voters to really like, and for some of them to even access it, I think there just might be...
to even finish it.
Right. I think there just might be enough appreciation for her as an actor and appreciation for the stretch.
Right.
That will kind of allow that nomination to happen.
Yeah.
In a way, it's not very dissimilar, even though, again, the films are very different, to someone like Ana de Armas getting a nomination for Blonde. I mean, I can't imagine a lot of people, and I quite like Blonde. I hope I don't get in trouble for saying that. But it's not like you can imagine a lot of people watching Blonde and thinking, oh wow, this was such an easy watch and it was incredible and I loved it and I loved sitting through it. I mean, some people probably thought it was pretty harrowing and I wouldn't want to do it again. But she still got nominated because I feel like you can't watch that movie and not appreciate what the actor is bringing to it and the bravery and the courage and everything that it takes to pull that off.
Right.
Add to that now that Rose Byrne is probably a well-liked actor for her years in comedy and in the ensembles she's been a part of, in television and film. In a way, she's very ambidextrous because she can kind of do everything.
Right.
So I think that will all play a big factor into getting her into those 5, despite it being a film that I don't think they're going to like.
Which is a big thing because we had at one point thought that this would be possibly the ceremony where Rose was destined to be snubbed from. I will say this, I believe this group found space to nominate Daniel Craig in Queer last year. And so that bodes well for her.
Yeah.
But if she, this is possibly the group that may be most intolerant of the idea that the camera is on her, on a close-up for the majority of the film with very little other interaction in a 2-shot or anything like that. This would be the place where they may frown upon that. But again, it seems like the actor could just be well respected enough to sort of muscle her way in, especially with this kind of competition.
Right. And I think that if it does happen, I think that's a huge thing for Rose Byrne. I think that kind of solidifies her Academy Award nomination, if I'm being honest. In the same way that I think the SAG nomination for Ana de Armas solidified it for me, in my opinion. Right. So if that does happen, I think it's a huge thing for her campaign and for her chances of getting nominated.
All right. So we're saying Buckley, Byrne, Reinsve, Tessa Thompson, and Kate Hudson.
Yes.
So let's look at Best Actor now. I think Best Actor has the benefit of being like a tighter group, right? That's that we're considering. It seems to me like both leads from what should be the favorite film should get in. So Michael B. Jordan for Sinners, Leonardo DiCaprio for One Bad After Another, especially because he got left off for Killers of the Flower Moon. Ethan Hawke for Blue Moon makes a lot of sense, right? He's riding a high right now. It's also a real person, right? It's also Lawrence Hart, which I think a lot of actors are going to be familiar with. It would be his 4th nomination, that helps. It would actually only be Michael's first individual nomination. He got ironed for the ensemble of Black Panther, but I think that's even more reason why they want to nominate Michael B. Jordan. And then we have Timothée Chalamet, who was last year's winner, right? For A Complete Unknown. We feel comfortable with him getting in. It'd be his 4th nomination. He's been on ensembles that have been nominated here before. It's kind of a late-breaking movie. We're leaving it out of ensemble, but it's also sort of, as we said, that kind of anchor to the entire movie. The performance is the anchor to the entire movie, so we definitely feel like he'll show up here.
Right.
That leaves one spot open, and a lot of people feel like maybe that spot should go to Wagner Moura, but we're keeping him off, right?
Well, as we said, foreign performances don't tend to do well in this awards body, and since we're already nominating Renata and Stellan Skarsgård, which are foreign performances, I think that we should err on the side of caution and consider that no other foreign performance will get in. Wagner Moura reminds me a lot of Antonio Banderas in Pain and Glory.
That's right.
When he didn't get a nomination here either. Even last year when Fernando Torres didn't get a nomination here, being in a foreign language film.
Funnily enough, I was gonna just to piggyback on the point you're making. Historically speaking, SAG has been kinder to foreign language female performances than they have to male performance. So Banderas did not get in here. Javier Bardem didn't get in here for Beautiful. And so they've been a little bit more welcoming of, for example, Marion Cotillard for La Vie en Rose, Marion Cotillard for Rust and Bones. So yeah, to your point.
Yeah, exactly. And so I would expect Wagner Moura to be an easy miss here.
Right. It's good. It's also important to say that I think foreign films in general, so far we haven't seen 2 foreign performances from 2 different movies make it in at the same time, right? So when
last year was
Zoe
Saldana and Carlos Sofia Gascon for the same
Perez movie. And No, I'm Still Here, for example. But for example, when they nominated Marion Cotillard for La Vie en Rose, they did not nominate another foreign language performance that year.
Right.
The same thing for when they nominated Penelope Cruz in Volver. And so that doesn't tend to happen.
Right, 100%, exactly. And so if we take out Wagner Moura, we could expect... There's a couple of other options, of which I think the best option is Joel Edgerton for Train Dreams. I think he's clearly in the hunt for a Best Actor nomination. We've expressed how we think Train Dreams is a film that's quite liked and quite towards the top of the list of what Oscar voters are going to respond to, especially as an American independent film. He's never been nominated at SAG, or I don't know if he's been nominated part of any ensemble. I don't think he has. And I think this is the opportunity for him to get in. But I would place him firmly in fifth, because if you've seen the film, it's not a dialogue heavy performance. There's a lot of silences, a lot of acting, sort of internally, which is a difficult task in and of itself for an actor, and that I think actors might appreciate, but it also might lack that loudness that I think some of them, are more attracted to. So if he were not to make it, some people would consider is Jesse Plemons for Begonia. They've never nominated Jesse Plemons, so they're kind of late there. Maybe they might want to sort of make, correct that. However, I don't think Begonia is the movie to do that. I firmly see that being like an Emma Stone solo nomination in this awards body, if it happens at all. George Clooney, Jay Kelly makes sense, but other films have, more momentum right now, like Train Dreams. Jeremy Allen White could surprise, possibly, with Deliver Me From Nowhere. But, he's been awarded on the TV side of things, and that film has been sort of under the radar as well. Dwayne Johnson is someone that some people are, landing on, interestingly enough.
I mean, I think maybe because of the whole Safdie thing, possibly. He's also a real life character, and maybe a real life a figure, and maybe they're going to want to include someone that's, based on a real life figure that's a little bit closer to reality than Marty Mauser.
We have Ethan Hawke too.
Oh, we do have Ethan Hawke. I mean, I think it's a little bit of a stretch. I don't know if Dwayne Johnson just has the filmography to convince the Actors Guild to nominate him there,
or that the film was as popular.
Yeah,
to sort of overcome that.
Right. I think Jeremy Allen White, as we said, is a little bit of a dark horse.
What
here.
about Russell Crowe, Will Arnett?
Russell, I think, has done well here in the past, but I worry about Nuremberg not having shown up anywhere else. It's been really quiet. Will Arnett is the interesting one,
because he kind of gives the Sarah Silverman vibe.
Exactly.
A comedic actor that I'm not used to seeing in this light, pulling it off, lovely.
And sort of also maybe reflecting on his own life and career and artistry, and bringing that into the screen, directed by an actor, Bradley Cooper. Maybe that could be something that really helps. Again, Will Arnett, like Rose Byrne, has worked in film, has worked as a supporting actor, is the lead right now. He doesn't get very many chances to be the lead. He's worked on TV, has been, recognized by his peers before. Certainly a dark horse there. I think the big reason why I think it's smart to lean on Joel Edgerton is because, in general, Netflix tends to get in for one of the lead races, at least, if not both. And so right now we have it on the outs for best actress, excuse me. So it would not make a lot of sense to have it miss actor and actress. I remember a year like 2022 when they really scrambled to campaign All Quiet on the Western Front because Glass Onion never took off. They were still able to get, as you said, Anna de Armas in for Blonde.
The question is if they would feel more comfortable with the actor-friendly part is George Clooney and Jay Kelly,
exactly,
as opposed to the more stoic, brooding, kind of surrounded by silences, internal kind of performance that is Joel Edgerton's in Train Dreams.
And we're sort of pegging right now that Joel is a little bit more in the hunt for that nomination. And if Joel were to miss a nomination here, I think it'd be pretty significant. The same thing where, I could see them saying, I'd rather nominate George Clooney for playing an actor. But as we said, maybe they don't want to nominate George Clooney for playing a version of George Clooney. That can happen as well. But I do think we should lean on the side of a Netflix guy for that first spot. Right.
So we're saying Michael B. Jordan for Sinners, Ethan Hawke for Blue Moon, Timothée Chalamet for Marty Supreme, Leo DiCaprio for One Battle After Another, and Joel Edgerton for Train Dreams.
Yeah, I think that's what makes the most sense right now. So what if we talk about supporting actress then?
Well, for supporting actress, again, I think of the 4 acting categories, it's one of the more, if not the most tumultuous one. It's a very unsettled race. And I think that the SAG will go a long way in revealing things to us specifically about this category. I think Wunmi Mosaku stands to do well here and get a SAG nomination despite having missed at the Golden Globes.
Right.
I think it's the kind of performance that they will respond to.
Mm-hmm.
I think Sinners is going to do, he's going to do more than just get an ensemble nomination. She's arguably the best, performance in the film.
Mm-hmm.
I just feel really good about that one.
Right.
I think Elle Fanning stands to do well here as well for sentimental value. I think it helps that she's sort of the English language performance in the film.
Another actress.
She's playing another actor. I think they like her. She's already been nominated for The Great. And
she was passed over last year also.
She was passed over last year for A Complete Unknown.
Right.
I would expect her to make this list and to not, Inga Ipstatir Lilias, to not make this list.
To miss out.
Right. But I still like sentimental value showing up in the supporting category, especially if you can spotlight an English-speaking performance.
I mean, we've always talked about this idea again where like if you want, most of the times, if you want to end up at the Oscars, a film gets 2 nominations in the same acting category, usually the SAG is the ultimate test of that. And so Elle and Inga both got in for a Golden Globe. Statistically speaking, Elle and Inga should both get in to a SAG if they hope to both get in at the Oscars.
I mean, that's been the statistic.
Yeah.
Again, it's not foolproof. Like it could still happen if it doesn't, but it's a good indication that, if you get that double nomination in the category like Sam Rockwell and Woody Harrelson in 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri, then you're going to double up, more than likely when it comes to the Oscars. When you don't do it, like Willem Dafoe and Mark Ruffalo in Poor Things, Willem Dafoe got the nomination at the SAG. Mark Ruffalo didn't. Again, they both didn't. Right. At the Oscars.
And this sort of this sort of killed Selena Gomez last year from Emilia Perez, remember? Yeah.
That she wasn't able to double up here. So because we're talking about a foreign language film and because their tendency is not to spotlight a lot of foreign language performances, I think we might be able to get away with Elle Fanning getting in here and not having both Elle Fanning and Inga and still being able to get both of them in at the Oscars. It could happen. Again, it's a little bit of uncharted territory with the amount of, foreign language films in contention this year.
Right.
But also don't be surprised that Elle Fanning does get the nomination here and is the only one who gets it here and is also the only one that gets it at the Oscars because she's the more known of the two. And some people might say she has more credits than the two of the two as well. So all that.
Dakota Sister's also been nominated in this category for I Am Sam.
Right.
Don't forget that.
Right. So we have always felt that Inga was in danger of missing ultimately at the Oscars, and that if they had to pick, they would pick Elle Fanning because she's just more known. We'll see if we're right there. The other person that I expect to do well here is Amy Madigan for Weapons. I think she's a veteran actor. This would, interestingly enough, be her first SAG nomination, which I think is a big deal.
Right.
I think that, if they had the opportunity to correct that and have her be a SAG nominee, they would. This is the perfect excuse.
Right.
And I think she stands to prove a lot of naysayers wrong throughout this award season. And I like the fact that, again, there's it's a film from an actor turned director, that usually is a film that, tends to get spotlighted somewhere. We have an ensemble. I certainly think it'll happen here in supporting actress. And I think that it'll be Amy Madigan for Weapons. We'll get in here.
There was also some doubt as to whether Demi Moore could get in or not for The Substance, and she still managed to get in. So even without that Weapons ensemble nomination, you still expect to see Amy Madigan here. And again, a lot of her early success when she got that Academy Award nomination predates the SAG, right? Because the SAG doesn't start till the mid-90s. And Amy Madigan's having a lot of success in the mid-'80s, late '80s, Field of Dreams in '89, things like that. And so she didn't really have an opportunity to get a spotlight here.
Right. And then I think those last two slots are the toughest ones. I personally think that Teyana Taylor is just too showy in One Battle After Another to not get nominated in this awards body. I expect her to be there. Is there a possibility that her character again is a bit too prickly for them, and they decide that they might just not want to nominate that character. It's possible. I wouldn't be absolutely shocked if she missed, but I fully expect her to not miss.
I wonder if the number of credits is also working against her here.
Yeah,
not
exactly.
unlike Inga, right?
Not like Inga, yeah.
Limited credits at this point.
Yes, 100%. I think that's something that is a handicap she has to deal with. Could they nominate Emily Blunt for The Smashing Machine?
She's a
she
real
did
person.
Get that Globe nomination. It really helps that she's one of the few, maybe the only real life figure that you can nominate in this category. And like we said, both the SAG and the Oscars like to spotlight real life figures in their acting categories and each of their acting categories. But her getting in without Dwayne Johnson is kind of weird, even though again they're not averse to doing that. Remember when Claire Foy got in,
right
for First Man, when the actual First Man didn't get in.
That's funny.
Glenn Close for Wake Up Dead Man. I feel, to the detriment of Glenn Close, I feel like Amy Madigan has kind of stolen the thunder a little bit because she occupies the same space that Glenn Close would in being an older actor in their 70s,
right?
Who's yet to win an Oscar,
right?
Having the industry rally around you. In a way, she's kind of usurping all of that attention
at the same time.
And they also are not known for spotlighting Knives Out films in any capacity.
Say, the curse of the Knives Out movie may be too much for her to defeat. Even if, we've talked about in the past, the idea that Netflix traditionally does really well in the supporting actress category, they still couldn't get Janelle Monáe in for Glass Onion. And so there is a little bit of a Knives Out curse. And then the other thing is that if you look at Glenn Close's career, you'll often see that she doesn't have as many SAG nominations. Again, a lot of her early success in the 80s predates the arrival of the SAGs. In fact, the SAGs kick off in the mid-90s when she sort of has moved to television.
Right, but I mean, as of beforehand, the SAGs were like, they would spotlight one actor, with a ceremony. But when they started giving out nominations, multiple nominations per category, different categories, that was in the 90s.
Right. So, I mean, she doesn't really get in for nominations at the SAG until later in her career, including, The Wife and Hillbilly Elegy. But most of the time, when she got a SAG nomination on the film side, she was a Golden Globe nominee already. And she failed to do that for Wake Up Dead Man. So that's going against her as well.
I also think that the Marty Supreme actors are at a disadvantage here. We don't think the Marty Supreme is going to be a big SAG movie per se. And even if it is, I don't think it's beyond Timothée Chalamet. I don't think Odessa is that known. I'm not sure she has enough here to stand out.
She's Pamela Adlon's daughter. That helps.
Okay, yeah, you're right. That helps. I think Gwyneth Paltrow's break from acting and return, I think it might be a little bit too soon after her break.
Although she plays an actor.
Even though she plays an actor, but we have some of that in Elle Fanning already.
Right. There's just not enough meat, I think, to either of those roles for them to
like we said at the beginning. The film is very much the twister that is Marty Supreme. Everyone else is just background.
Yeah.
So I don't expect either Marty Supreme actresses to get in. Haley Steinfeld is an interesting one. Could they possibly give, instead of a double nomination to Sentimental Value, give a double nomination to Sinners? I mean, she is a past SAG nominee.
I think that's what kills her. I think that's what kills her.
Yeah, that could hurt. She's also hasn't been known a lot for her acting work since True Grit in a weird way. She hasn't had a lot of standout material since then. I wonder if Tessa Thompson getting in could possibly squeeze in someone like Nina Haas for Hedda, and they get in as a pair. But I think that I think Nina Haas's superpower is her foreign appeal.
Yeah, her international fans.
Yeah, I think that's going to be missing a little bit for these SAG
the
committees.
American Guild. Yeah,
right. But like I said, all that Nina Haas needs to get nominated is for Tessa Thompson to get a SAG nomination,
because she commands that much respect. I think what you talked about the other day, like Kate Blanchett, did a special screening for Hedda. So
for Hedda, and so Jennifer Lopez would make perfect sense here, being in a period piece, being in a musical, but that film has struggled ever since its underperformance at the box office. And then that leaves really two other people. That leaves Ariana Grande for Wicked, which arguably is a co-lead. She was just nominated last year. It would be back-to-back. Like we said, the SAGs aren't super fond of nominating too many actors back-to-back, and we've already got one in Timothée Chalamet for Marty Supreme. What are the odds that they would nominate Ariana Grande again, but snub Cynthia Erivo.
We also did some research, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we feel confident about Timothée Chalamet getting in for Best Actor, and because Cynthia is contending an actress and Ariana in supporting actress, we went and we saw how often, you know, 3 actors can repeat back to back in the same category, and we didn't come up to very
without
many,
a category
without
shift.
a category shift. So, for example, in 2009. Jeff Bridges was nominated for Crazy Heart, Colin Firth for A Single Man, and Jeremy Renner for The Hurt Locker.
All an
The
actor.
following year,
All
all
the
of
lead
them
actor.
as lead actors. The following year, all 3 got nominated again, right?
At the SAGs.
But Jeremy Renner moved down to supporting actor for The Town.
Right.
Meanwhile, Colin Firth was still in lead actor for The King's Speech, and Jeff Bridges, a lead actor for True Grit.
Mm-hmm.
So 3 can repeat, but 3 without a category shift. Add to that the back-to-back nominations for Cynthia Erivo and Ariana Grande for the same role. That's a little bit of a, something that hasn't happened,
Yeah, I think that it's actually never happened also that that there've been, 3 repeats and no category shift.
Right. And so
let alone for the same role.
Like I remember when Meryl Streep and Penelope Cruz were both nominees. Yeah, nominees, and one of them was a winner in 2008, right, for Doubt and Vicky Cristina Barcelona. And the very next year, they were nominees again. Meryl Streep for Julie and Julia, Penelope Cruz for 9. But those were for different movies. So I think that, just the nature of the fact that both Cynthia and Ariana are playing the same character, that's another element that's going to hurt them, not help them, in my opinion.
Right. There's always the possibility, though, that, there aren't 3 repeats, and I guess Ariana Grande gets in without Cynthia Erivo,
right?
Like in the Critics' Choice,
right?
I just wonder how likely that is for the SAG to overlook Cynthia, but to not overlook Ariana, who's not really an actor, or who's just starting her acting career. If they're going to overlook Cynthia, who's more of an established actor, why overlook her but not overlook Ariana Grande, who's more of a musician?
Maybe
it sounds weird to me.
It does sound weird, but maybe they may feel that, oh, well, Cynthia Erivo has 2 nominations already because we did nominate her for Harriet.
Right.
At the same time, the idea of giving Ariana 2 and 2 back-to-back for the same character could also be,
could feel like too much.
Exactly. Like I imagine one reason why they would want to keep off Cynthia is because, oh, well, we already nominated her for playing Elphaba and for playing Harriet Tubman.
Right.
Versus for Ariana, it would be I'm nominating her for playing Glinda and Glinda.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Same thing.
Right. So I think we're opting right now for people to be surprised and for it to be a complete Wicked for Good shutout at the SAGs after being a high of getting 4.
Right. Maybe stunt ensemble, maybe.
Oh, maybe stunt. Yeah. We'll see if we're right there. That'll be a big decrease.
Right.
Right. But it makes sense, because again, you don't often see sequels repeat, at the SAG. And when they have, like the Lord of the Rings trilogy, those were all critically acclaimed films that were nominated for Best Picture.
I mean, I still think there's a scenario where they nominate...
or rather, they were nominated for Best Picture, and they were obviously top 5 Best Pictures.
Right. I think there's still a scenario where you can maybe see Wicked get only 1 nomination. Again, not counting stunt, but 1 nomination for ensemble. And that maybe could be enough to celebrate the film. And it's sort of like, that's the one film of the 5 that's probably on the chopping block when it comes down to the Best Picture, top 10.
Right.
There's still a chance of that, but right now I think we're leaning towards a shutout.
Right. And so then that leaves 2 contenders getting in, or rather that leaves Teyana Taylor, which I had said earlier, and Regina Hall getting in alongside her in One Bout After Another. I think you and I have been really high on Regina Hall making it to the end for One Battle After Another because of the love for the film and the respect and the critical admiration, because she's of the 2 supporting actresses, or really of the 3 if you count Chase Infinity, she's indisputably the one who has more of a career, a filmic career. And I just don't know that in this field of supporting actresses, the Academy voters are going to end up, turning down an opportunity to spotlight her.
Right.
Again, she is very short, is very brief in the film, but she is memorable.
Right.
And she has emotional scenes. Her performance is really quietly beautiful, graceful,
and out of character somewhat.
Right. I think a lot of people will be surprised by her depth as an actor. We won't, but some people will. And I just don't know that I see, again, long game Oscar voters turning that opportunity down if there's space.
Remember, she was a former Oscars host at one point.
that worked. That helped Ariana DeBose.
Right. I do think that she could show up here. I think last year brevity played a factor as to why Isabella Rossellini did not show up here.
Yeah.
So we can't dismiss that entirely.
Right. But again, because we think so strongly that she'll show up at the end of the finish line, we feel like this would be the moment for her to show how much of a threat she is to get into that final five. And she'd get in with Teyana Taylor. And like we said earlier, when we were talking about the SAGs, if there's going to be a double up, it would be good to see that double up happen at the SAGs. It gives us more, ammunition for it to happen at the Oscars.
Right.
So if they both get in at the SAG, it's over, in my opinion. They're both getting into the Academy Awards.
There is a part of me that's a little bit afraid that what the actor committee is going to end up doing and what the Guild Award is going to end up doing for the actors is that they might sideline both Chase Infinity and Teyana Taylor as the actors with a less established career and instead nominate Regina Hall as possibly the only female non-ensemble to get an individual nomination, in large part because Regina Hall has been doing this for upwards of 20 years in different capacities throughout the industry, right? So I do still think there's a chance of that, but seeing the competition, I feel like if there's a moment where they're going to double, this would be the first one where we see it.
Right. I 100% agree. If they don't double, I think it's not a good sign for Regina Hall to make it at the very end. I hope that's not true. I'd love to see her in the final five. But I would think it's a big handicap to those aspirations if she doesn't get this SAG nomination. Again, I think there's space at this moment for her to sort of seize the moment.
Right.
We'll see if it happens.
Yeah.
So we're predicting Wunmi Masaku, Elle Fanning, Amy Madigan, Regina Hall, and Teyana Taylor.
Exactly. And jumping to support...
Oh, well, I just want to say one last thing. In the event that Teyana Taylor gets snubbed here and instead only Regina Hall gets nominated, I would add, that to me would be a positive sign that Regina Hall, that Teyana and Regina will both get nominated.
Right.
Because I just don't see Teyana getting snubbed.
Right.
Because it's just too showy of a performance, too memorable.
Yeah.
So even if that happens, I still think that we'll end up seeing a double up.
Yeah. I agree. I agree with that. Where if Regina showed up by herself, I would still expect them both to show up at the end.
Yeah.
I think jumping to supporting actor then, again, this is sort of, I think, calcified into a few contenders. I think first on our list is we feel comfortable about Paul Mescal, right, for Hamnet, in large part because he has yet to be nominated for any kind of SAG award. So no ensemble mentions, unlike Jessie Buckley, who was there for Women Talking. He has an Oscar nomination for After Sun, but they did not nominate him here. So you and I feel really confident about that he'll get in with Jessie Buckley at minimum, no matter what happens with the ensemble. Stellan Skarsgård is another foreign language performance that we're thinking is going to get in. Again, Renata Rines, so he should get in. There's a pair. The ensemble we're predicting to get in, but also it's a role that appeals to the industry. Then we still have Benicio del Toro, right? One bad after another. He's been nominated for 21 Grams, Traffic. He even has a win for Traffic, oddly enough.
In lead.
He won the actor in lead. After that, I think you and I feel really good about Delroy Lindo.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
What do you think?
100%. I think Delroy Lindo is an actor in his 70s, an older actor, an actor who's been around for a very long time, never really gotten his flowers. He was snubbed from this awards body for Da 5 Bloods, even though that was still nominated for ensemble. And I think this is an opportunity for them to spotlight him specifically, individually. And considering what A Favorite Sinners is, I don't see them passing that opportunity up.
Right. I mean, he's still going to be nominated for the Ensemble of Sinners, but at this point, he's been nominated as part of the ensemble for The 5 Bloods, The Cider House Rules, Get Shorty. So if you think there's ever going to be a moment to spotlight him individually, at least on the film side, this would be the moment.
Yeah.
Right. So
I think that this would do wonders for his Oscar campaign.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. We're seeing Delroy getting in there. And then for the fifth and final spot, a lot of people want to talk about Sean Penn for One Bad After Another. And he has felt pretty safe throughout this entire time. He has 4 nominations, including 2 wins, Mystic River and Milk. But we're sort of maybe a little bit iffy on that, right?
Right. I think that the Academy, apologize. The SAG committees might feel a little bit they might feel that the character is too too unlikable, and maybe too, disgusting, maybe just too much of an antagonist, too much, just, I hesitate to use the word evil because I think villainous, exactly. Even though villains do well in general on awards races, I think there's a limit. And I think that Sean Penn in One Battle After Another might reach that limit a little bit for them. Also as an actor who's been awarded already several times. I just think that I see something similar happen here, the way it happened for Guy Pearce for The Brutalist.
Oh, yeah.
When he got snubbed and people were surprised. But, if it's a villain that they feel really antagonistic towards, I think there's less of a likelihood that they'll feel compelled to include them. I think it'll be a different story at the Oscars,
right? But
certainly at the SAG, don't be surprised if we see someone like Sean Penn for that character miss out in favor of what probably is more of a fan favorite, or a personal favorite for a lot of people, and that's Jacob Elordi in Frankenstein.
Right, and so I think right now we're leaning toward Jacob getting that final spot.
Right. And I like Frankenstein showing up somewhere.
Right.
In a similar way that Kate Blanchett's, Nightmare Alley still showed up for Kate Blanchett. Yeah. Shape of Water still showed up several, for acting nominations. So I think they're prone to embracing a Guillermo film. And I think, again, this is the kind of awards body that, someone like Jacob Elordi and his rising star sort of status, they'd show up here.
I do think it's interesting that we're going to have a list that includes both Jacob Elordi and Paul Mescal. I don't know if that's going to get much traction at the Oscars, but we are leaning towards Jacob Elordi. Other contenders that we did consider, I thought Adam Sandler's a real big dark horse here for Jay Kelly,
right?
Especially if George Clooney gets in. I mean, right now we have George Clooney on the outs for Joe Edgerton, but Jay Kelly as a movie, again, that's about actors and about the industry, that could easily appeal to them. Right. I think the other thing about Adam is that he got that nomination recently for Hustle, another Netflix movie in lead. But I do think there's something about the character that would appeal to the SAG committee. So you have to really be careful with him.
Right.
And then
100%, I think Adam Sandler is like 7th.
Right.
And if he hadn't gotten that nomination for Hustle,
he would have gotten in here. And again, it may get close. I think, we've talked about Andrew Scott for Blue Moon with Ethan Hawke. That's not, out of the question. Josh O'Connor, especially if Glenn Close gets in. But again, the Curse of the Knives Out movie. Jacoby Jupe is someone we haven't talked about, but he is not supposedly included in the ensemble for Hamnet.
Interesting.
If word got around that he is not in there, I could see them going for Jacoby Jupe. I mean,
again, the SAG is very welcoming towards children,
towards young actors.
More than the Academy Awards are. Yeah. So if that were to happen, I wouldn't be shocked.
I would not be shocked if maybe the double up there is the two Hamnet guys, or maybe Paul Mescal gets sidelined for Jacoby, especially since Paul Mescal sort of flirts with the idea, what is he leaders he's supporting? They may feel that way.
Right.
Okay, and so our final list then would be Jacob Elordi for Frankenstein, Delroy Lindo for Sinners, Benicio del Toro, One Bite After Another, Stan Skarsgård and Sentimental Value, and Paul Mescal for Hamnet. And so that, I think, that's everything for the SAG. Why don't we jump really quick and discuss who we're thinking is going to walk out with the wins for the Golden Globes. All right, so why don't we start with motion picture drama. Nominees were Frankenstein, Hamnet, It Was Just an Accident, The Secret Agent, Sentimental Value, and Sinners. A lot of foreign films here, but who do you think is the favorite?
I think it's really between Hamnet and Sinners. But I think that the Golden Globes might be prone to spreading the wealth a little bit. And I feel like Hamnet, I think, is the one that I'm leaning towards to win this award over Sinners. I think that's going to be a surprise to some people because I think Sinners is the favorite. Actually, I think we think that Sinners is going to win box office achievement, and that they'll leave Hamnet to be the drama winner.
Sort of like in the vein of when Barbie won box office achievement, I believe.
Right.
And they gave comedy film to Poor Things.
Right.
All right, so why don't we move then to motion picture, music, or a comedy? Again, a lot of foreign films here. The nominees were Blue Moon, Begonia, Marty Supreme, No Other Choice, Nouvelle Vague, One Bite After Another. Richard Linklater got in here twice, surprisingly, What are you thinking?
I think this is the easiest one. It'll be one battle after another.
And it's not even going to come
Full
close.
stop.
Full stop. Okay. If we go now to actor in a drama, this is kind of a fun category. The nominees were Joel Edgerton in Train Dreams, Oscar Isaac, surprisingly, for Frankenstein. Dwayne Johnson made a comeback for The Smashing Machine. Michael B. Jordan got in for Sinners. Wagner Moura for The Secret Agent. And Jeremy Allen White, who's a double nominee, got in for Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere.
Right. I think this is another easy one. I think that this will be Wagner Moura winning for The Secret Agent, along the lines of how Fernando Torres prevailed. Last year, you and I predicted that correctly, even though I think most people weren't predicting that.
It would make sense, right? Because I'm Still Here wasn't even a Best Picture nominee.
Yeah, exactly.
And won this
The
category.
Secret Agent is.
Yeah.
It has 3 nominations, Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Foreign Film. And I actually think this is the area where they can most spotlight The Secret Agent.
Mm-hmm.
So count on that being the winner.
I mean, I will also say keep an eye out for Michael B. Jordan because I do think that Sinners is potentially, it will lose to Hamnet, but as you said, it should be the runner-up to Hamnet and Best Picture Drama.
Mm-hmm.
So it is probably the favorite dramatic picture of these, possibly more than The Secret Agent. I don't know, maybe.
Right. But like I said, this is the one area where you can spotlight The Secret Agent, and I don't expect them to pass that up.
Although it's been doing really well in foreign film categories just throughout the season, so that's another thing to keep in mind. So if we jump to Best Actor, Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy, Timothée Chalamet for MARTY SUPREME, and he has I think maybe this is his 5th nomination, maybe I think now.
So.
George Clooney's in there for Jay Kelly. Leonardo DiCaprio, One Battle After Another. Ethan Hawke for Blue Moon. Lee Byung-hun for No Other Choice, which I believe is the first Asian actor in a foreign language film to get listed here, which is great. Jesse Plemons for Begonia. What do you think is going to go?
This is actually the toughest one, or one of the tougher categories, because I think it's going to be a fight between Timothée Chalamet and Ethan Hawke for Blue Moon, and I think we might be seeing that final showdown at the Oscars as well. We'll see. We'll see. You know, Timothée Chalamet, interestingly enough, has more nominations than Ethan Hawke does.
At this point, yeah.
At this point. Possibly they're more fans of Chalamet than Hawke. MARTY SUPREME kind of underperformed here. 3 nominations. Right, I only got 3 nominations. It missed score, it missed director,
supporting actors.
Any supporting actors. And in a way, I think Blue Moon overperformed because it got an eye for Best Picture.
That's right. That is true. I think I agree.
Right. But I expect the recency bias / the fact that he's been nominated so many times to favor Timothée Chalamet in this race.
He does have a bunch of nominations, no wins yet. They didn't give him the win for Complete Unknown, favoring the winner, Adrian Brody, right, for The Brutalist, who ended up winning the Oscar. Could they maybe feel pressured to say this is finally the time to give him the win? At the same time, we were just talking about I'm Still Here. Does Sony Picture Classics have some Sony Picture Classics magic here to get Ethan Hawke the win? Obviously, they had enough magic to get Blue Moon.
And also Fernando Torres last year.
Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Can we see the same Sony Pictures magic that carried Fernando Torres have Ethan Hawke edge out Timothée Chalamet? We already saw a little bit of that Sony Classics magic because Blue Moon was not supposed to get into Best Picture.
Yeah.
So do you think that could happen? Yeah. Could that be a factor?
Yes, 100%. 100%. But I think there's a showiness. There's a showiness to both performances, but I don't know. I think I see the Globes as lacking the sort of dynamism of MARTY SUPREME a little bit more than the sort of staginess of Blue Moon.
Right.
You know, personally.
Right.
So I think Timothée Chalamet prevails, but I would not be shocked in the slightest if Blue Moon wins.
If Ethan Hawke pulls it out. Okay, well, actress in a motion picture drama, Jessie Buckley in Hamnet, Jennifer Lawrence in Die My Love, Whom They Love, Renata Rines in Sentimental Value, Julia Roberts for After the Hunt, Tessa Thompson got in for Hedda, and Ava Victor was a really welcome surprise for Sorry Baby. Who do you think is going to be the winner here? Is it even going to be a challenge? Absolutely not.
I think this is absolutely Jessie Buckley's to lose. She will win this category. She will win the Oscar. That's it. It's an incredible performance, and this is the kind of performance that wins, that sweeps. So expect her to be the bona fide winner, yeah.
And you probably think it probably helps the fact that she's in the Best Picture drama
100%.
winner. Or what you're predicting is 100%.
Actually, I think we've been seeing a trend. Correct me if I'm wrong, those who are listening, but I think we've been seeing a trend that the lead winners, at least one of them, you know, their film should be winning the top prize.
Right. And it would make sense. Yeah.
It would make sense, especially if, for example, Marty Supreme, if One Bad After Another does win Best Picture, as I feel very confident, Marty Supreme win for Best Actor doesn't correlate there, but a Hamnet win for Best Actress does.
Right. And same thing
with Hamnet winning Best Picture Drama.
Same thing. I mean, well, Wagner Moura, the winning actor drama, could possibly, but you in general, Hamnet performed a little bit better. Than The Secret Agent.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then this is kind of an interesting category, which is actress in a motion picture, musical, or comedy. Rose Byrne got in for If I Had Legs I'd Kick You, the film's only nomination. Cynthia Erivo was able to get back-to-back nominations for Wicked for Good. This is, I think, her third nomination here at the Golden Globes, if I'm correct, at least on the film side. Kate Hudson got in for Song Sung Blue. Chase Infinity for One Battle After Another. Amanda Seyfried for The Testament of Anne Lee. Emma Stone for Begonia. A lot of previous winners here, including Emma Stone. Amanda Seyfried won for The Dropout. I even think Kate Hudson was the winner here for Almost Famous. So not too many individuals who don't have a win here. Rose Byrne, Cynthia Erivo, some of the few.
Yeah.
What do you think?
And so I think this is one of the more interesting categories. I think it's really down to two actresses. I think that's Rose Byrne and Amanda Seyfried. And both of them, interestingly enough, are in challenging films that are not going to be a lot of people's cup of tea. And certainly I think they're going to have a hard time battling for that Oscar nomination. But I actually think that the Golden Globe voters are very eager to get someone like Rose Byrne on their stage to accept an award. I think it helps that she's never won a Golden Globe. Meanwhile, Amanda Seyfried has already for The Dropout.
Exactly.
Amanda Seyfried is a double nominee, so you always have to be careful for those double nominees because usually, more often than not, they end up winning something.
Yeah. We checked that out. That most of the times in the year where the Golden Globes have a nominee, an actor who's double nominated, they'll end up winning one. And in a year where they have multiple, as we do this year, we have Jeremy Allen White, we have Jacob Elordi, we have Amanda Seyfried. One of them should pick up a win somewhere.
Right.
Right,
exactly. And so I think that helps Amanda, but I think that, again, they want to see Rose on that stage. She's a very, as we've been saying, appreciated actor. They're going to appreciate the stretch. And I think a win here, along with a very possible SAG nomination, this could be the week that a Rose Byrne nomination for If I Had Legs I'd Kick You, becomes solidified.
I mean, I think it's also interesting, right? I mean, there's been a lot of talk about Kate Hudson as of late. She won for Almost Famous. This is her third nomination because they did nominate her for music, which was a huge ass flop. But she still got nominated for it. So maybe they have something for Kate Hudson. At the same time, kind of weird, right? Kate Hudson being the only nomination for Song Sung Blue. You would think that would for sure get Hugh Jackman in, possibly Picture.
Right.
A Testament of Anne Lee, another one that you thought would have gotten a Best Picture nomination. It only got Amanda Seyfried. Rose Byrne, no surprise, by herself. But even
I'm not surprised by the Amanda Seyfried being by herself.
Well, I mean, I guess since The Brulis did well, and it's a musical, and it has the period piece, and it has, some international European infrastructure to it. I believe they shot it abroad. That may be appealing to them, but that wasn't the case. I think I was at least expecting it to contend in the film side. Cynthia Erivo is not in Best Picture either. The only Best Picture only Best Picture actor on the list is Emma Stone for Begonia and Chase Infinity for One Battle After Another. You don't think that's going to be a factor whatsoever?
I think both of them are not going to be big competitors for Rose Byrne because one of them is, very relatively new in her acting career, borderline supporting, and that's Chase Infinity and One Battle After Another. And then the other one has already been handsomely rewarded by the Golden Globes, winning just 2 years ago for Poor Things. So really, given that that's her biggest competition, I think Rose Byrne pulls it out.
All right. Well, let's talk about then supporting actor. Nominees were Benicio del Toro for One Battle After Another, as well as Sean Penn for One Battle After Another. So they doubled up here. Paul Mescal got in for Hamnet. Jacob Elordi got in for Frankenstein. Adam Sandler got in for Jay Kelly. Stan Skarsgård nominated for Sentimental Value. A lot of nominees here are previous winners, including Del Toro, Sean Penn, Skarsgård. First nomination from Paul Mescal. Jacob Elordi, double nominee this year for supporting actor, but also on the miniseries side, Adam Sandler, a former nominee for Punch Drunk Love from PTA. What do you think?
I think this is one of the tougher races because I think it's really between Stellan Skarsgård or Jacob Elordi. You know, I do feel pretty confident that Stellan Skarsgård will prevail at the Oscars. But when it comes to the Golden Globes and, you know, them liking to, you know, name check, you know, the biggest name, and spotlight the biggest name, the biggest draw, and, you know, Jacob Elordi being the sort of, you know, the popularity that he has at the moment, you know, this young, attractive guy, and the transformative aspect to, you know, playing the monster in Frankenstein. I think those are all things that tend to appeal to an awards body like the Golden Globes. However, I really do feel that they really liked Sentimental Value, having 7 nominations. It's a tough one.
Yeah.
It's a tough one between those two. Right now, I feel inclined to say Stellan Skarsgård. For Sentimental Value.
Do you think that the love for Frankenstein is going to play a factor? I mean, This is a movie that got nominated for Oscar Isaac as well.
Right. And it's kind of like one of the few opportunities that they have to give Frankenstein something.
Exactly. Because it's got picture, director. I mean, a lot of other races that it's just not as competitive in. Do you think here, because it is extremely competitive here in supporting actor, do you think that just they're going to look at this as the opportunity to give a win to Frankenstein?
It could be. Like I said, it's one of the tougher acting categories. The other one possibly being, you know, the supporting category, the best supporting actress.
Right.
It's tough. I don't know. You know, there's something about Stellan Skarsgård winning for that performance in Sentimental Value that to me feels like the kind of thing that the Golden Globes would want to award. He is a past winner. That's something to consider. Pretty recently for Chernobyl. But I don't know, you know, especially, you know, with the Hollywood foreign press, the foreign appeal of the film, he's playing a filmmaker, you know, I don't know. To me, it seems to me like the kind of move that they'd make, they'd give it to Stellan Skarsgård.
You're giving him the edge. I mean, I will say again, as we were saying about double nominees, right now, Jeremy Allen White is up for The Bear. It's his 4th time. It would be the 4th consecutive time he wins on the TV side for that performance. He's up for Springsteen, where he's not as competitive. Amanda Seyfried, you're voting against in Best Actress, and she's up for a miniseries as well, but she's not as competitive there. Jacob is possibly the best candidate of all the double nominees to squeeze out a win.
Right.
Because he's in Frankenstein, the most beloved film between that, Springsteen, and Lee.
Right.
But so it'll come close, but you're leaning towards Stellan Skarsgård.
I am at the moment. What about you?
I think I would probably say that statistically this looks like it should go to Jacob.
Yeah. It's one of the tougher categories.
Well, let's jump to supporting actress then, because the nominees there were Emily Blunt for The Smashing Machine, which was a surprise. A real person, Elle Fanning for Sentimental Value, as well as Inga Absdottir Liljas for Sentimental Value. So they doubled up here, just like the Wombatto guys did in supporting actor. Ariana Grande got in again for Wicked for Good. Amy Madigan was in for Weapons, which was great to see. And Teyana Taylor was the sole nominee here for One Bat After Another.
You know, I think the only this is an interesting category because I think besides Emily Blunt, there could be an argument that any of the other 5 could possibly win this category. I think that Elle Fanning and Inga there might be a little bit of a vote splitting there happening between the two of them. So I probably would refrain from predicting them. I think Ariana Grande is not in a Best Picture movie, so I think that it's probably a good idea to favor, you know, or to look at, you know, the contenders that are in Best Picture films for these wins in the acting categories when you have the opportunity to do so. But Amy Madigan is also not in a Best Picture film, and she has been nominated a few times at the Golden Globes. She's a past winner for the Golden Globes.
Yeah.
I think they respect her. I think, you know, the more that this award season unspools, I think people will see that the industry is pretty happy to root for Amy Madigan at this moment in her career. And I think, again, when I think about who the Golden Globes want on their stage, Amy Madigan is attractive for that. That being said, I do think that we're averaging some diversity in the, you know, acting winners. And right now, all we've got is Wagner Moura for The Secret Agent. Possibly, could that be the only one? Possibly, but I would wager that, you know, if they can, they would try to spread the wealth a little bit, have a lineup that's more diverse. On top of that, Teyana Taylor is also in the Best Picture film, probably the Best Picture winner. And it'd be one of the only ways to give One Battle After Another an acting win. So I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to say that Teyana Taylor wins the Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actress over what probably some people think is the favorite, and that I would, that I understand being the favorite at this moment, and that's Amy Madigan for Weapons.
I will say that makes a lot of sense to me. But keep your eye out for Elle Fanning, because she's been nominated before. She plays an actor, but also just of all of the individuals who do not have a Golden Globe. So I'm not including, Emily Blunt, Amy Madigan. She seems to me the one that's most ripe in her career for this kind of win, at least among the Golden Globes, or how the Golden Globes have traditionally voted. So keep your eye out on that.
That's interesting. And you think that Ariana Grande, is not at that level from the other possibilities?
I think it's tough because Ariana Grande, I think the wicked miss for Best Picture really really hurts the film. I think the film will probably be most competitive in the box office success category or the song category.
Right. For Best Screenplay, I think we saw a very, very prominent trend for the Golden Globes is that the Screenplay Award ends up going to a film that did not win any of the Best Picture awards.
Right.
So if you look at it that way, I think the favorites would have to be take out Hamnet and take out One Bite After Another. I think the favorites would have to be two foreign films. It Was Just an Accident and Sentimental Value, as well as Sinners.
Right.
However, I think that the Golden Globes would prefer either the two other foreign films,
not the
than
genre
the sort of spectacle genre film that is Sinners.
That makes sense.
So I'd choose between It Was Just an Accident and Sentimental Value. And of the two, Sentimental Value has more nominations, including getting a nomination that we didn't think was going to happen for Inga Ipsitou-Lilius for supporting actress. So I'm going with Sentimental Value being a screenplay winner.
I agree with you. I think it's between those two.
And I think in a similar way that Anatomy of a Fall won screenplay here, I believe its year, 2023, I think so.
I believe so, yes.
I think that it might precipitate a sort of, sort of situate Sentimental Value as the favorite for the original screenplay category.
It might bump it into the front runner for this category.
Yeah.
I think that's a very interesting point. I think it could happen. Watch out for Jafar Panahi, because I think that this group especially is going to want to spotlight It Was Just an Accident, that filmmaker, and what his films are about. I think we're thinking they're going to spread the wealth.
Right.
But
that's what I was going to say, that because we're thinking that It Was Just an Accident will win Best International Film and they'll have Jafar Panahi on the stage for that award, that they'll have more space to give Sentimental Value. Especially if Jacob Elordi ends up winning supporting actor, then this is one of the very few places that they can actually spotlight Sentimental Value.
I think that's a great point. Of course, it could always flip. And so let's jump next to non-English language film, international film nominees, where It Was Just an Accident, No Other Choice, The Secret Agent, Sentimental Value, SIRÀT, and The Voice of Hugh Rajab finally made it in from Tunisia. And so certainly what you could see is Sentimental win screenplay, and something like It Was Just an Accident, right, win international film, foreign language film. Especially because we're sort of pegging Wagner as the winner for Best Actor, so there's less pressure for The Secret Agent to win there, even though it's been doing really well in this category.
Right.
But you could always flip, right? You can have It Was Just an Accident be the screenplay winner and Sentimental Value win foreign film. Yeah. So which way are you siding?
So like we said, I think that It Was Just an Accident. This will be kind of the best place to give Jafar Panahi a platform, a spotlight, his story and his filmmaking. So I'm thinking It Was Just an Accident. Yeah.
Do you think there's any chance that one of the foreign films walks out completely empty? That they sort of start, sort of cannibalizing each other.
Those three.
Yeah, between those three. I mean, no other choice too. Oh, no other choices are for picture and actor. So even between the four of them, and I think right now we're pegging No Other Choice to go home empty.
Yeah.
But between those three, which are on the drama side, which could be a little bit heftier, we can say, do you think that there's a chance that between The Secret Agent, It Was Just an Accident, and Sentimental Value, that there's a possibility that one of them goes empty?
No.
I don't think that they really want to spread it between them.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. All right, so let's look at animated film. The nominees were Arco, Demon Slayer got in, Elio, K-pop Demon Hunters, Little Amelie, the character of Rain, and Zootopia 2. And
I think this is an easy one. I think K-pop Demon Hunters is the more popular one, the more populist choice, and I think that when they can, especially in these sort of, side categories, ghettoized categories, they'll go with the populist pick. So yeah, I say K-pop Demon Hunters.
Okay. I mean, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think it has to be the favorite. But I think we should jump from there into box office. Box office achievement, a bunch of nominees here, including K-pop Demon Hunters. The nominees were Avatar Fire and Ash, F1, K-pop Demon Hunters, Mission Impossible The Final Reckoning, Sinners, Weapons, Wicked for Good, and Zootopia 2.
I think that Sinners has to do well overall, and right now we're kind of blanking it for too many. So I think this is one of the prime places for it to prevail and win. As we saw with, I like the comparison you used with Barbie, which was a big hit, but there were also aspects of that film that were particularly niche. I think the nicheness, of the genre-ness of it all, for the Golden Globes in particular, might make it more attractive to spotlight them in the box office achievement category, which I think is a sham. But I think this is a prime place to give Sinners something.
Right. I think K-pop could show up here possibly, but since it's winning animated, I think you're right. This is the moment to give an award to Sinners, which comes at the detriment of, bigger movies like F1, Avatar, and Wicked, which could potentially walk away with nothing.
Right.
Let's jump then to another category where Sinners, I would assume, should be very competitive, and that's original song. Nominees included Dream as One from Avatar Fire and Ash, The Girl in the Bubble from Wicked for Good, Golden from K-pop Demon Hunters, I Lied to You from Sinners, No Place Like Home from Wicked for Good, double nomination, and Train Dreams from Train Dreams.
Right. I actually think that this might be a place where K-pop Demon Hunters prevails as well, because there's a foreign aspect to it, in terms of the musicians and the lyricists for that, and the musicians behind that song. And that's such a big hit commercially as well. I wouldn't be surprised if Sinners won for I Lied to You, but right now I would side with K-pop and instead give Sinners score.
All right, so then you're thinking Sinners for score. The nominees there are Frankenstein, and again, you don't have it for very, very many wins here, especially without Jacob Elordi. Sinners, One Battle After Another, SIRÄT scored a nomination here, which was a surprise to some. Hamnet, and F1, Hans Zimmer got in for F1. So here you're thinking is where Sinners is going to walk out with another win.
Yeah.
All right. So Sinners here, I think that's smart. I will say the nomination for SIRÄT is interesting.
Yes.
And this would be maybe one of the few areas that they could give a win to SIRÄT if they really wanted to. Frankenstein as well. They do like a lot Alexander Desplat. So keep an eye on that. The final category was Best Director. Nominees were Paul Thomas Anderson, One Battle After Another. Ryan Coogler got in for Sinners. Guillermo del Toro got in for Frankenstein. Jafar Panahi for It Was Just an Accident. Joaquin Trier, Sentimental Value. Chloe Zhao for Hamnet.
I think this is one of the easier categories to predict. I think a recent trend has been that one of the films that wins Best Picture, they also win Best Director. I just think that there's no stopping Paul Thomas Anderson for this film. And he's going to be the clear favorite all season long. And he's winning this award hands down, in my opinion.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Is there a scenario?
Or someone like Jafar Panahi.
Right.
But I guess, like I said, because One Battle is winning Best Picture and there's been that trend, and because they're going to already have an opportunity to spotlight Jafar Panahi, for the international film category, there's just no reason to depart from that trend, in my opinion.
Do you think that just the story of Jafar Panahi is maybe going to make him a very tempting spoiler
Could
here?
be. Yeah, 100%. 100%. I think he is the spoiler.
Especially, for example, what if they don't want to share the wealth between all the foreign films and they want one foreign film to dominate, to get more than one win? This would be an easy way to give It Was Just an Accident, foreign film and director, for example, or Secret Agent, actor and foreign film, but then you can have Jafar Panahi show up for director. So you think that maybe all the story, the narrative surrounding Jafar Panahi and him sort of, being at odds with his government, that can maybe play out to seeing a moment where Jafar Panahi, I don't even know if he'll be there. I suspect that he will not be there, but a moment of solidarity, where we present that award to Jafar Panahi, and again, what his cinema stands for, and what he accomplished this year.
Yeah, I agree. I think he is certainly the spoiler, but
Especially
I do
from
think
the Hollywood Foreign Press.
Right. But I do feel like PGA will be.
It'll break for Paul Thomas Anderson.
Yeah.
What's kind of interesting is that most of the time, you don't want to be winning, I think, the Best Director prize at the Golden Globes. So that's kind of interesting if you see that breaking for Paul Thomas Anderson. All right, so that's how we see the Golden Globes playing out. I think let's talk about quickly what some of our reaction is to what the results were for the Critics' Choice. All right, and keeping with Critics' Choice tradition, it was a very awkward ceremony. Let's go over some of the winners here. Visual effects went to Avatar. No surprise there, right? This is actually the first year they're presenting an award for Best Sound, and the win went to F1.
That was kind of weird.
I think it was uninspired. It kind of makes sense, I guess, because, to a certain degree, they try to project who might win the Oscar, and it's about race car driving. Maybe there was some vote splitting here. I don't know. I didn't think it was a very inspired choice.
Neither did I, but maybe it adds, credence to this idea that it's definitely going to be a nominee for sound.
I will say this, again, it's their first time presenting the award. You should never be under the impression that the win, especially below the line, is a guarantee of anything. This is the same Critics' Choice that gave a win to Barbie for makeup. It did not qualify. That gave a win to visual effects to Oppenheimer. It did not qualify. And so this routinely happens. Last year they also gave for example, they gave the win for editing to Challengers, which was very well deserved, a fantastic, inspiring choice. But it didn't make it at the very end. Hair and makeup went to Frankenstein. No surprise there, right? We thought that was going to happen.
100%.
And keeping on the trajectory, Frankenstein also walked out with the win for costume design and for production design. I for one was a little bit surprised because I thought Wicked, which was still a Best Picture nominee despite polarizing critics, would at least walk out with the costume design win, but that was not the case. Right.
I wonder if, again, can you see a repeat here happening at the Oscars where Frankenstein sweeps those three texts as well?
What would be fascinating about that is I don't think that, for all of the accolades that Nightmare Alley and Shape of Water scored, right? It didn't win those categories. Right. It didn't score wins for costume, production design.
I believe it did win production design.
Did it?
It won score.
For Shape of Water?
Yeah, it won score, production design, director, and picture.
Okay, so, in Guillermo del Toro's oeuvre, costume design has remained elusive to him because Pan's Labyrinth didn't even get nominated there. So I think you're right. We could very well be seeing these three repeat for Frankenstein at the Oscars. The winner for a song was Golden, which is what you thought would happen for K-pop. As score went to Sinners. No surprise there. Should still be the favorite. On the animated side, K-pop was also the winner. And in a quite embarrassing moment, The Secret Agent won foreign language film off air on the carpet. And then they tried to save face by inviting Kleber and Wagner to present Best Picture. And I thought the best moment of the night was when Wagner Moura presented Best Picture and said, what we in Brazil would call Best Foreign Film. I think that was fantastic. Cinematography went to Train Dreams.
I think that's one of the interesting wins. It was one of the wins where it felt like, they weren't trying to predict Oscars and they went with what they were most passionate about. I think Sinners is still the favorite, but seeing a win for Train Dreams was interesting.
It was nice. It was nice, but I have to say, it kind of sucks that Autumn didn't get a chance to go on stage. I don't know if she was there. But
I don't think any of those got a chance.
You're right. That's right. They presented it during the commercial breaks. But kind of surprising for Sinners not to win there. And I don't think that we're going to see that happen again, whether it's at the Guild or elsewhere.
It might show that there's just general passion behind Train Dreams. So they wanted to give it something.
Yeah. I think you're right about
which
that.
goes, which backs up our idea that it's a very well-liked film.
Yeah. F1 won editing in a category that also had A House of Dynamite with its only nomination because they need a veteran here. The Perfect Neighbor, which was a very inspired choice. Marty Supreme, one bout after another in Sinners. I don't expect F1 to repeat this win at the Oscars.
But possibly it will do well and get nominated.
Maybe. Again,
certainly in that veteran spot.
Right. I think it could happen, but no win, I think, guarantees the inclusion there. If we look at maybe some of those specialized categories, ensemble went to Sinners, which is what we were thinking was going to happen, right? And young actor went to Miles Caden for Sinners, which was great to see. Even though Jacoby Jupe looked disappointed.
I like Jacoby.
Yeah. A very sweet moment between him and
Chloe Zhao
at the ceremony. A lot of people talked about it. Let's see. Overall, I believe that Sinners and Frankenstein walked out with
Frankenstein had 4.
Yeah, Frankenstein walked out with 4. Sinners walked out with 4. One Bad After Another walked out with 3. F1 walked out with 2, as did K-pop Demon Hunters. Let's talk a little bit about what happened above the line. Adapted screenplay, One Bad After Another.
No surprise
there. Original screenplay went to Sinners.
They certainly picked what has so far been the favorite amongst the critics group's precursors. I find it odd, the whole Sinners screenplay thing, because I am someone who believes, alongside you, I believe that the screenplay is kind of like the weakest part of the film.
Right.
And it's one reason why I always expected the film to possibly get snubbed when it came time to the Oscars. However, that seems less and less likely that it will get nominated. And in the event that it does, I don't expect it to win that category.
Sinners.
Exactly, Sinners. I have found it kind of strange that it has been the favorite amongst critics groups.
Right.
So I think they went with the favorite, but I don't expect that to repeat.
Maybe because the idea and the
the concept.
The concept is so inspired. I certainly feel like it's a film that's more directed than it is written.
100%.
I would rather, give Ryan Coogler the award for directing rather than writing.
Right.
At the same time, it does feel to me like a moment where they could easily hand it to Sinners. One of the big stories, I think, here, and we'll touch upon as we continue to talk about the winners, Sentimental Value walked out with nothing. And it lost your original screenplay. I think.
But it wasn't very liked by this group in general. It didn't get an eye for Best Picture. Did it?
Well, yes, it did.
Oh, it did? It missed something.
It missed international film, which is kind of weird.
Which is bizarre.
It's a foreign film that made it into Best Picture, but did not make it into foreign film. It was, I believe it was nominated for 8 Critics' Choice Awards, but it did not get any wins whatsoever. It was nominated for 7 Critics' Choice Awards. It didn't get any wins anywhere, which was kind of interesting to see. It got as many wins as one of the least popular international films, which we had pegged for international film, which was It Was Just an Accident.
Right.
The big winner for international films was really The Secret Agent, who really only won international film. So certainly the Critics' Choice, oddly enough, is one of the least international of all these accolades that are being given at the end of the year. Moving on to supporting actress, we saw a win for Amy Madigan in Weapons, and you were early on this, and she ended up winning. You predicted her to win. What'd you think?
I certainly think that she was the favorite to win here. Considering that she's the precursor favorite, the Critics' Choice does tend to favor whoever's the precursor favorite when they can. Obviously, they're not going to do it for Rose Byrne, but when they can do it, especially in the supporting categories, they'll do it. And so they picked the precursor favorite, which is Amy Madigan, but I do think this
close,
is right.
She's close with Tayana.
Actually, no. Well,
she's pulled ahead.
She's certainly ahead, but they're somewhat close. Check out our charts, by the way; they're on our website. They have the precursors there. But I think it's a good win for her. I think her getting on stage again just began to show that there is industry favor. The industry favors her and is really happy about celebrating and rooting for her in this moment. I think she's going to give good speeches. I think there's something really laid back, very unpretentious about her. Very organic, very natural.
Earthy, yeah.
And something just nice seeing someone not in their prime having such a prime moment.
It kind of felt that Ethan Hawke was happy to give her the award too, right?
Yeah. She's just been around for a very long time. She has a decades-long career. It feels like the beginning of something forming here for her, possibly, in that, even if it's an unorthodox choice for a Best Supporting Actress win, it might just have all the right elements, and more importantly, the industry backing behind it to make it happen.
I think it's also interesting. Again, Amy Madigan is the longtime partner of Ed Harris, and that's an important thing to remember. But something else is, I think it was really appropriate that Ethan Hawke gave her the award. Ethan Hawke was a nominee tonight. He did not win. But they sort of have similar stories in the sense that they've been in the industry for such a long time and they can do anything and they've mostly done everything. And Ethan Hawke is a nominee this year, but Ethan Hawke will just as professionally and just as, creatively tackle The Black Phone as he will Blue Moon. And so I think it was really appropriate to have this actor who can appreciate what Amy Madigan could bring to a movie beyond, a boxed-in, prepackaged Oscar contender. It's a horror film, but it's still, she did an incredible job acting in it.
Right.
And I think that he's one of those actors who, if he had a list, I think he would put her high. Right.
Exactly. I initially, when the ceremony started, we live tweeted the whole thing, but we also, I interpret it as if they're going to follow their hearts, they're going to vote for Amy Madigan. If they're going to go with who they think is going to win the Oscar at the end of the day, I think they would have chosen Teyana Taylor. I think they went with their hearts. But like I said, I think this could be the beginning of seeing just how much the industry is willing to make this win happen. I would say, and we've talked about this, and we'll see how much of it comes into fruition, especially this week with the SAG nominations. I will say watch out for Wunmi Mosaku, who might just be the best alternative to, okay, maybe I don't want to give it to Teyana Taylor because the character's a little bit too, prickly for me. Maybe I don't want to give it to Amy Madigan. She might be a solo nominee. Weapons wasn't really my thing. It's very genre. Well, you know what? You kind of get the best of both worlds in a way with Wunmi Mosaku in Sinners, which is also, probably going to be a big Best Picture favorite. So watch out for Wunmi Mosaku.
Yeah.
Because at the end, she could really muster a lot of goodwill, and that could be an acting win.
I agree there, and you have to be careful with a nomination for her at the SAG, where the tide could really turn. Wunmi Mosaku, previous BAFTA nominee, so don't be surprised if you get a little bit of a turn of the tide there as well. But continuing with the love for horror films, supporting actor went to Jacob Elordi for Frankenstein, which is something you were sort of resistant to, but I had sort of pegged as maybe this was a place they were going to give the win to, and it kind of not too different from what you're saying in the sense where it's just been discussed at such length where if they're going to follow their heart, it kind of made me feel like it would have gone for this performance from Jacob
because I thought they would
Stellan.
I thought they would have wanted to predict who was going to win the Oscar, but they didn't.
I mean, they didn't unless they really think that there's a lot of mileage here, which may be the case. Maybe we're underestimating it, or maybe they're probably overestimating it. Because even if he does get nominated, I assume at one point, just the nature of him being early in his career, the nature of the role
100%.
is going to factor against him. But it was a huge win win for him.
Yeah, I think Stan Skarsgård wasn't there, was he?
I don't know. I didn't see him.
I didn't think he was.
I know I saw Elle, and I think I saw Inga.
I'm not sure I saw Inga either.
I know I saw Elle.
That's very interesting. I wonder if that could have played a part.
You know what? I think he was there because they had an interview with Alexander, his son, who was there. And I think they had alluded to his father was on the way or something like that. But I did not see him. But again, it's a big win for him. Not a lock by any means. I don't think Amy Madigan's a lock either. And I think we'll cap this off after the lead actors. But the Critics' Choice are not infallible. But first, let's talk about Best Actress. And finally, Jessie Buckley gets on the stage for Hamnet, and she lives up to all the expectations of what was a great speech.
Yeah, great speech. You could feel in the room the appreciation and the respect for the performance, for the actor, for her talent.
The respect that the actor also has for the craft.
Right, exactly.
Sort of
that comes through.
Yeah, just like very earnestly just thanking everyone there for inspiring her and sort of sharing in a community of storytellers.
Yeah.
Sort of the metaphor or the story of the cave drawings and the cave. And
I really felt like she held the audience's attention. And again, I just think that it felt to me like, the room was ready and proud to have her represent them as their best actress.
I feel that's I think you said exactly what was on my mind. I think by far the best speech on the film side. I think the best speech might have been Rhea Seehorn for Pluribus, but I think the best speech on the film side was Jessie Buckley. And I feel like that's the speech that most voters are going to say, I want to hear that 3 or 4 more times.
Yeah, right.
Which brings us to our final speech, which was the win for Best Actor went to Timothée Chalamet, which you had correctly predicted. I was a little bit split. I thought it would be Leo DiCaprio for one battle after another.
Well, before we get there, I think there's a lot to unpack with the Timothée Chalamet stuff, that I think was one of the more interesting revelatory moments of the entire thing. before that, we'll just, really quickly,
Okay.
obviously
All
the Oscar frontrunner that is One Bite After Another, won Best Picture and Best Director. Those weren't surprises. I
Okay.
expect that to happen again at the Golden Globes. I think the big sort of ceremony where they might get a little bit stopped in their tracks, One Bite After Another, meaning would be the SAG, when they might very well lose to Sinners. But other than that,
Or the PGA also.
well, I guess maybe the
the
PGA,
amount of
maybe the
success
PGA,
that Sinners had.
maybe
Like
the
I said,
PGA.
I think I tweeted something like that. As the race comes to a close and we get like to the very last week or two of the Oscar season, get ready for this race to get really close between Sinners and One Battle, and Warner Brothers wins regardless. But I think you're right. No surprise. One Battle wins director and picture. Paul was very brief on stage, very visibly nervous. It was great to see him on there.
I mean, as we've said, Paul Thomas Anderson is our hero, and seeing him on stage is just a pleasure.
And it's also great because it's very evident that for Paul and for a lot of people just there tonight, and I suspect this will be the case throughout the season, Ryan Coogler and everything he's achieved this year with Sinners is a hero to them, which was great to see. But so let's circle back around to what we think was maybe one of the more consequential moments of the night, which was the Timothée Chalamet win for Marty Supreme. Again, you had pegged this. I had thought maybe DiCaprio for One Bite After Another.
Certainly he was, I think for most people, he was the favorite, so I wasn't surprised by the win.
Marty Supreme.
Unfortunately, I don't think that the speech lived up to it, lived up to the moment, so to speak.
Right.
I think he was nervous. He stumbled on his words.
You know what? He came in late. There was some discussion about him coming in late.
Right. He fumbled some of his words. He didn't come across as very poised. I think that was missing. But I couldn't help but look at some of the reaction shots from people like Joel Edgerton and Ethan Hawke and Wagner Moura. And I just felt like in the air there must have been, or felt like there was at least this sensation of, this young actor who's not even 30 yet is getting this, moment. And here I am, with a decades-long career, because Wagner Moura might be familiar for people who've seen Narcos and that, but he's actually been working for a very long time. You can't help but think that they would feel kind of like, well, I guess, it's not my moment yet, but I've been doing this for a really long time. And here's this young man, sort of capitalizing on the moment and there's sort of a discrepancy in that. And I can't help but feel like the reaction shots really expressed that, really portrayed that. I can't help but feel that Joe Edgerton was thinking that Wagner Moura was thinking that Ethan Hawke was thinking that, and then add that the speech didn't have that sort of, control and poise. It kind of just added to this narrative that, is Timothée Chalamet really ready to win an Academy Award?
I think that's what happened, is we saw a lot of fuel added to that fire because it was not very poised. It was, sort of not very eloquent and very erratic, and you shouting out Michael B. Jordan a bunch of times, not really discussing the process. Again, it's kind of the antithesis of the speech he gave for A Complete Unknown, where it seemed very prepared and very ready to deliver his honest feelings about how he feels about himself and his career. So it's kind of a weird mix of that, but at the same time,
it could be actually also reactionary.
Maybe.
Last time I did this, and I was, kind of being honest,
Right. I mean, I will also say that it's kind of tough to follow Jessie Buckley, right? Who is, seems very much about, how the art touches her or inspires her in a very specific way, very personal way, and just a lot of appreciation. And again, she was ready to be in the moment, despite it being her first time on that stage. And it just didn't seem like Timothée was on that level, and it didn't seem like any one of those individuals that you talked about, and I'll add Michael B. Jordan, it didn't seem like what he was delivering was very inspiring or inspiring to them.
Right.
And so it did seem a little bit like the young man in the room, like the youngest nominee in the category won. Yeah. And it was apparent.
Yeah, exactly. And I think this coalesces a little bit with things that have been surging with Timothée Chalamet for a while now. And it's that, besides having this sort of youthful energy to him, he is a very young man. He's not even 30 yet, I believe so. He's very popular at the moment. He's dating a Kardashian. He's dating Kylie Jenner. He's very much in the pulse of, mainstream
Popular
pop culture. There's an aspect to all of this that I think might just be a little bit too loud and too, ostentatious for some voters. And I also think who like their actors a little bit more, reserved, like Jesse Buckley, for the craft.
Right.
I do this for the craft. Add to that the antics of the promotional,
thing.
the press tour for Marty Supreme, I think might have rubbed people the wrong way.
Again, it's been very successful because the film has made a lot of money. But yes, this could be a factor.
When you're seeing him rapping, and you're seeing him, just with these with his cockiness,
On top of this
in
fear.
a way, it's for some voters, it could easily be polarizing.
Mm-hmm.
It could easily be unattractive. But then when you have a moment like this, it's sort of like, because those things already exist in the ether, those antics, the popularity, all of that stuff, you have doubly the pressure to like perform, to hit it out of the park.
Right.
Because it's not as if, it's an unknown actor that I'm getting to know for the first time.
Right.
Like Mikey Madison in a way, who didn't give super eloquent speeches when she won.
No.
But, they were acceptable because, it's a new face that you're just getting to know and you're happy for her.
Right.
It's almost like all that attention on Timothée Chalamet as the person, as the figure, just adds more pressure to having to pull these moments off.
Right. But the expectation, I think, is a little bit higher for Timothée Chalamet, even if that is unfair, and maybe it is. But he's not like Mikey Madison. Mikey Madison had her moment in Honora that he had in Call Me By Your Name. And so he's been on the stage, or, he's been in this environment several times already. So to me, it's sort of like, when Joaquin Phoenix lost for all those times he was nominated, he wasn't necessarily at a place to deliver the sort of speeches and the sort of appreciation and the sort of share the sort of wisdom that he's had over an immense career when he was finally up for the win for Joker.
Right.
It's sort of like, it sort of coalesced where the industry was finally ready to give it to him, and he was finally ready to accept it in a way that they were comfortable with, if that makes sense.
Right.
And sometimes it doesn't reflect the performance, but this comes with, all campaigning. And so certainly it was the speech that you and I were sort of left thinking, this is a stumble.
Right.
This is an immediate stumble.
But I also say, unfairly as it may sound, I do think that, the fact that he's dating Kylie, and again, just I think adds more spotlight to this idea that he's, a very popular figure, in pop culture at the moment, that I think makes it a little bit less attractive to give him an Oscar. Before the age of 30 or at the age of 30, in a way, some voters might see his 3 nominations in lead, possibly 3 nominations in lead, as award enough. That maybe he's not yet at that stage where they feel the maturity is there to, I guess, that the maturity that they're comfortable with, to give him the lead actor Oscar win. I don't know.
Right. I mean, I think you're valid in all things you're saying, and I share that sentiment and those thoughts.
And I feel bad saying that, because I don't think you should.
Oh, no.
You should never judge or judge someone's performance or their work based on, for example, who they're dating.
Right.
But I think in the society that we live in, unfair as it is, I think those are things that you think about.
Right.
Like Timothée Chalamet dating Kylie Jenner, rapping, all these things. They just make him a less attractive contender.
Right. And I think part of the issue also, and I think that element exists, but I'm not sure it's going to take over everything. But to me, more importantly, is just the quality of the speech, right? Married with his age, which is usually very young in his career to be getting this award, coupled with the character of Marty Mauser from Marty Supreme. That to me is where we start getting too complicated, because again, I don't think that I think Marty Mauser is an extremely unlikable character. And I think, Timothée Chalamet does an incredible job playing the character, but his unlikability is pretty extreme. I think. And that's going to turn off some voters. And so in order to balance that, you really have to knock it out of the park on that stage. And so...
Which in a way, I think someone like Demi Moore did such a great job being in a film that doesn't necessarily, wouldn't speak to a lot of voters.
Right.
It's sort of outside their comfort zone. It's, very genre, very graphic, but
Very
her
quiet.
speeches were so, there's not a lot of dialogue. Her speeches were so of such high quality, high caliber that it helped balance things out,
Yeah, incredibly earnest, incredibly authentic.
Well-spoken.
Well-spoken, humble. And those things factor in. And again, she's still lost. So they're always going to judge the work first, but they are going to judge, I think, the fact that Marty Mauser is unlikable. Add to that he's coming off the achievement and the nomination for A Complete Unknown. I'm not sure if that helps or hurts. We already talked about how I think that there's a timing issue here. But you and I are sort of at this impasse where we feel that it's going to be very difficult for Ethan Hawke not to get nominated.
Right.
Leonardo DiCaprio is in one battle after another, and he's coming off a snub for Killers of the Flower Moon. We feel that Wagner Moura is in the right vehicle, and The Secret Agent is turning into a Best Picture movie, as we had sort of seen the potential for ever since Cannes, right? And it seems very difficult to maybe muscle him out. You refuse to sort of see how Joe Edgerton can be snubbed.
Right. I mean,
especially for Train Dreams is picking up so much steam as of late.
Exactly. If he's in a Best Picture movie, I feel like he's an actor who's paid his dues. He's been around for a very long time. He's worked with several actors. I think he commands respect for his craft, for his talent. I have a really hard time seeing him get snubbed if he's in a Best Picture film.
He's also one of the few international actors on this shortlist. All the rest are Americans.
Wagner Moura.
Him and Wagner Moura. And you usually see that factor in. I, on the other hand, I feel like I refuse to believe that Michael B. Jordan can be snubbed. Because again, Michael B. Jordan has delivered high caliber work in Fruitvale Station with Ryan Coogler, based on a real life figure. A huge breakout performance, would have been nominated in another year. He was excellent in Creed, where his co-star was nominated. Almost won again with Ryan Coogler. He was a scene stealer in Black Panther as the antagonist, as the villain. Critics pointed him out. It was a Best Picture movie, and he still didn't get in. I find it hard to believe that Michael B. Jordan, at this point in his career, is going to be snubbed. And you brought up the idea of, lead performances. They tend to be a little bit pickier about what the role is. And, the idea that Margot Robbie should have been there statistically for Barbie, right? But that she got snubbed because she was playing Barbie. And that makes sense. Except to me, the difference is Margot Robbie's been nominated several times, 3 times by that point, and Michael has yet to be nominated. And so if we're at this impasse and you think that Joe won't get snubbed, and I think that Michael won't get snubbed, the question is, who's going to get pushed out?
I see. I think that this is where I think, we're in disagreement here. And I think that the thing that Michael B. Jordan has going for him is possibly, industry goodwill, possibly. He's in a Best Picture film, his collaborations with Ryan Coogler, etc. And those are big assets. However, we just recently saw Sinners again when it had its re-release
In IMAX.
And you and I, after seeing it, came out thinking what we thought the first time, which is that Michael B. Jordan just doesn't have enough here to land a Best Actor nomination. He would be landing the Best Actor nomination above all else because of that goodwill. Not because there's a scene to latch on to or there's a big Oscar-y moment. Michael B. Jordan is missing those things. He has a couple confrontations that are very propelled by, plot devices. There's also the issue that he's playing 2 characters, but there's not enough being done in the performance or in the direction of the performance to differentiate the 2 twins, the set of twins, which I think might bite him in the butt. I don't know. We both felt very strongly that there just didn't seem like there was enough here to land a Best Actor nomination. And I think what's changing your mind a little bit now is that you see that there's goodwill for him and for the film and Ryan Coogler, etc. in this moment. And I get that. And that's no small thing. But if we're just looking at the film, when they put on the film and they watch the performance, every other actor you mentioned has a gravitas, has a scene, has moments that spell out, Oscar contention. Something that he doesn't have. In fact, I would go so far as to say very few people in that movie do have. One of the few people who has it is Wunmi Mosaku. The problem is, or rather the advantage is that someone like Wunmi, but someone also like Delroy Lindo benefit from being in the supporting category, where that might matter less, A, or B, the competition might be a little bit less fierce. But when we're looking at the 6 actors possibly who are looking to get nominated for Best Actor, it's more difficult to say that you're going to snub Joel Edgerton, for example, who, you're right, he doesn't have these big shouting Oscar moments, but a lot of it is internal. And a lot of that actors will be appreciative of, that you have to act without your words, that you have to act, trying to express the, ineffable, the internal. And, then they're showing us like Timothée Chalamet and Ethan Hawke, another very nuanced turn in Wagner Moura, so I just feel like all of these actors, just looking at the work itself, have stronger material than he does.
I think I understand that point, and I think it's valid. But to me, having just seen Marty Supreme, something really stands out. Timothée Chalamet on that stage really stands apart from the actors around him. Everything that he's accomplished thus far, all the accolades he has, the roles he has, versus these other actors, including Ethan Hawke, who has yet to get a nomination in the lead actor race. That's sort of something that's striking to the eye, and I think voters will catch on to that. Add to that when you see the actual films, again, the character of Marty Mauser really stands out against all the other characters as, the least redemptive of the 6, the least likable of the 6, the most problematic of the 6, the one that's difficult, the most difficult to like, regardless of the performance. The performance is, obviously people are going to appreciate that, right? That your performance was able to bring that character to life. But it's not going to change the way that some voters feel about the character. And in that sense, again, there's a big difference here. In my opinion, between all these elements, the personality, the speeches, everything that the actor has accomplished thus far, everything the actor will accomplish in the future, where his counterparts are at this point in their career, who the characters are among these 6. I think the one on the outside looking in, and it's controversial at this point, but I think this could catch on as the season progresses, is actually Timothée Chalamet. To add icing to the cake, I actually think it's Timothée in the position of Margot Robbie, in the sense that if you snub Margot Robbie for Barbie, she will get the nomination as the producer for the film. And that's what happened. Michael B. Jordan is not listed as a producer for Sinners. His chance to be nominated is in the actor category, and that's it. Timothée Chalamet is listed as a producer for Marty Supreme. So if he is snubbed from the final 5 at the Oscars for Best Actor, he will still be nominated as a producer for the film, should the film get in. Which, again, I think the film should comfortably get in because of a lack of competition.
Well, I just want to say that we don't know exactly yet if he, how that is. There's certain rules. You might be a producer, but at the end you might not qualify for the Oscar one. So we don't know that yet.
Right now, he is being campaigned as a producer on the FYC A24 Guild site. So it should very much be in the vein of the way Margot Robbie was nominated as a producer for Barbie. So because of that, I think the Academy is going to take advantage and leave him off the list and put in all these other actors who have not had an opportunity yet. And I think part of that is everything that we've mentioned. And part of that is the fact that he was just there for a complete unknown, for a performance that is again, as dimensional as that performance is quite likable. He did an excellent job. He didn't sugarcoat Bob Dylan at all, right? But that's not the same as what we're being asked to sort of vote for when we see Marty Mauser and Marty Supreme. And so that's I think where I'm at right now. And we may see this factor in, as I think we will, when SAG comes around, and he may lose it. When the Golden Globes come around, and right now we're pegging a win for him, but Blue Moon overperformed. So what if Ethan Hawke wins that category?
Right. If Ethan Hawke wins the Golden Globe, I think I'd be a little bit more open to possibly, seeing a world where he gets snubbed. Right now, I just think there's just too much momentum behind him to get snubbed. I think the real story here is possibly not winning and not being the runaway Oscar winner that people think it's going to be for Best Actor. I don't think the narrative is, oh, wow, he didn't get snubbed. In fact, like again, we disagree here. I think the narrative is Michael B. Jordan is definitely getting in. Oh, wait, he did not get in.
I think that if Train Dreams is pulling ahead right now at this moment, and Sinners is going to pull in close to spoiling the win for One Battle, then I think it's Marty that, when you really look at it, not very competitive in many categories, doesn't really have a moment this season. It's a good film. It's a good Safdie film. Maybe not the best Safdie film. I would argue that it's not going to be unanimous that this is the best Chalamet performance. And so looking at all those things, to me, it reads like an also-ran. If you're an also-ran, I think that puts you on the chopping block, because this opportunity does not come around very often for Michael B. Jordan, for Joe Edgerton.
Yeah, but you're keeping Leo DiCaprio.
Yes.
But the only excuse you're using is a snub for Killers of the Flower Moon, but they might as well just say, well, Leo's been here.
Yeah.
Leo will always be here.
Yeah.
Except we don't have to nominate him often.
Right. And I think that that's a valid point. I mean, if I had to kick someone else out, maybe it would be Leo, with the caveat being that Leo is in the surefire Best Picture too, right? And the other one being that he's coming off a snub, an egregious snub for Killers of the Flower Moon, right? And that I do think that there's sort of symmetry here between Leo finally getting in for a Paul Thomas Anderson film after, passing the chance to work with him in 1997 for Titanic, where he also got snubbed. I
depends on how many voters are aware of that.
I think the industry in general is aware of that, but I also think if we look at, big snubs that, most contenders have had to deal with, I think the one that's behind is Timothée, isn't he? Because First Reformed, Killers of the Flower Moon, Michael B. Jordan never, Joe Edgerton never, Wagner Moura never. So the one who's behind here, in terms of you have to, you get the accolades and you get the flowers, and then you take it on the chin as you get your lumps. The one who's sort of behind is Timothée Chalamet, isn't he?
Well, he got snubbed for Beautiful Boy, technically, after getting everything.
He got snubbed for Beautiful Boy after getting everything, right? Funnily enough, what does that follow? After he was the star for Call Me by Your Name. Mm-hmm. You don't see maybe a symmetry there? Everything that he got for Call Me by Your Name, A Complete Unknown last year, and now with Marty Supreme.
I would say that I disagree with you in the sense that I do think there are people who are going to think it is his best performance. Whether or not I think so, it's irrelevant. I think there are some voters that are going to see sort of the anti-hero of it all and immediately latch on a label of, oh, wow, that was like, he went somewhere,
right.
That kind of performance. So I disagree with you there. I don't think that there'll be most people won't. I don't think that most people won't think it's his best. I think a large portion will. And I think that right now it's just way too soon to think of such a drastic step as snubbing him. I get what you're saying, but I could easily say that Leo DiCaprio doesn't need to be there because he's definitely not winning. Joe Edgerton doesn't have one. Wagner Moura, Ethan Hawke, Timothée Chalamet doesn't have one. Leo DiCaprio is not winning. Not only does he already have an Oscar, it's an ensemble, it's not as showy. They might think it's very much in the realm of what they already nominated him for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, that sort of kind of, comedic, but still poignant presence. Really, Leo DiCaprio doesn't need to be on the list either.
Right.
So, like I said, I think it's way too drastic to think of a complete snub. And I'd have to see how the rest of the season unspools. I think I would start to smell what you're smelling if he loses the Golden Globe. But at this moment, you and I both know how this works. There's a lot of mechanization, a lot of machinery in the background, pulling the strings, pushing the narrative, pushing the moment. And right now he's got the backers and he's got the momentum. You know, could that be enough to win him the Academy Award? Possibly not. That happens all the time. But could it be enough to, would it not be enough to even get a nomination? That I'm a little bit less certain of.
I mean, sight unseen, we had said that while everyone is looking at Timothée Chalamet, the performance to sort of be aware of is Wagner Moura. And that while he may be the favorite, Wagner Moura is the dark horse here, could get a Golden Globe win, and could maybe be the only sizable threat to Timothée Chalamet. Months have passed, and I feel now we have seen it. And looking at that, I feel like Wagner Moura evens out a little bit more with him, just by the virtue of The Secret Agent is no longer the best kept secret. It is a surefire best picture contender right now, and it's going to have a tough time being kicked out of that top 10. After tonight, I don't think that Timothée Chalamet is the favorite anymore. I think it's going to be a dogfight between all of them, all these people, to score that nomination, and between some of them to score that win. And after that speech, I'm saying that he's no longer heads and shoulders in his positioning against the other nominees, the other contenders in his category, among these other these other 5 contenders, that he is as stable and as vulnerable as any of them.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is a performance that, despite all the fireworks that's going around with, critical acclaim and box office success and this recent win, I kind of feel this train going the opposite direction than it should be. Mm. He's getting less competitive, not more competitive.
Mm. I mean, like I said, that's an interesting point, but I'm not ready there. I'm not ready to say, I'm not ready to be on that side of the bridge and say, yeah, he's going to get snubbed. I'd have to see more things than just a poor speech. But I do think that the revolving factors around him, more than the performance itself, or rather more than the film or the performance, all the things around him, not helped by the fact that it's an unlikable character, but all the things around him, I think, are possibly the undoing here.
I mean,
of a win.
We'll see what happens. There's about a month left. But I think
not for nominations, because nominations will be soon. In fact, I think voting already started. I have to check that. And like I said, he's got the momentum.
He does have the momentum.
What he might lose in the end is enough of a reason to give him the win over someone like Ethan Hawke, over someone like Wagner Moura, over someone like Joe Edgerton. Even though I think Joe Edgerton is low on that poll for a win. I think that can change, but I think it's a little bit too late to change the wins of a third Timothée Chalamet performance.
To me, I feel the opposite. I feel if voting has started, that means most people are watching the film. And if most people are watching the film, I don't think this is a performance that's going to win over many. It's going to be respected by many. It might even be admired by many, but I don't think there's going to be too much passion for it, because Marty Mauser is just unfortunately too off-putting of a character. That's what I'm thinking. As more people watch it, that'll come more into play.
Well, we'll see what happens. I'm not ready to be there, but let's see what happens. Let's see how the rest of the season evolves.
Yeah,
correct. And I think we'll get our first taste of that is on Golden Globes to see if he loses that Best Actor Comedy Musical, because he should win.
That should
be a hands down win.
He should be winning that. So
yes,
we'll see.
100%.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that concludes a very lengthy episode, but we had a lot to go through for, this week is going to be packed with things, and the Golden Globes are coming up. The Critics' Choice is finished. The SAG will start revealing its cards. And yeah, there's a lot going on. Be sure to keep checking our website, framesandflicker.com, and our Twitter @AcademyAnon. Both of them are on the cover art. And yeah, this is Jules.
And this is Joseph.
And it's been a pleasure. See you next time.
If you've been enjoying the Academy Anonymous podcast and want to support the work we're doing, There's a voluntary support link in the show notes. Totally optional. Just a way to help us keep the podcast going. Thank you for listening.
The music on this episode, entitled Cool Cats, was graciously provided by Kevin MacLeod and Incompetech.com. Licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0. https://creativecommons.org/licenses/by/3.0.
Disclaimer. The Academy Anonymous podcast is in no way affiliated or endorsed by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences.